All right, good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Good morning, Miss.
Okay, perfect. All right. Let me just share my screen really quick. One second, I'm going to pull up the chat as well. All right, could everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so for this one, we're just going to go through the forearm as well as the hand. So the hand lecture is a little bit short, so that's good. The forearm's a little dense, so we'll try to break it down. I actually included some videos, which I'll talk about throughout the lecture, and I'll be showing you guys. Give me 1 second, because I got to make sure. Hold on.
Hey, Justin, I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
There's an additional, it looks like anatomical pictures of the hand and forearm on the canvas, but he has not covered that. He says we're going on to the legs. Is that a PowerPoint we need to look at?
Can you state your question one more time? My bad, I didn't hear you.
There's an additional PowerPoint with anatomical pictures of the forearm and hand that he has not gone over. Like everything looks like kind of like string cheese.
Okay.
And I don't know if we need to review that PowerPoint or not because it's on the canvas, but he hasn't talked about it.
Okay. So I haven't seen it. So if he hasn't talked about it, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It's probably just to review the forearms. So I would definitely focus on the forearm slides and knowing everything that's on there and then using it as supplements. So for example, he has a PowerPoint that says innervation of the limbs. That's all the way at the end. That's talking about all the innervations for all the muscles that he talks about throughout all the lectures. So that's going to be a good PowerPoint to look at, obviously, because that's going to summarize all the innervations for everything we've talked about. But it's just supplemental. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. Oop, done. Okay, that's better. There we go. Okay. All right, so we're going to start with the forum, and then feel free, just feel free to let me know if you have any questions, hop on in, ask in the chat as well. So for the forum, I broke up the forum into compartments, so you'll see throughout the lecture, so that it makes it a little bit easier because in total, there's actually 20 forearm muscles. So that's a lot of muscles to go over in one lecture. So I want to make sure I was breaking it up into components in the flexor compartment as well as the extensors, and then breaking it up accordingly. So you'll see throughout the lecture, I've actually inputted some videos because I thought to see videos that would be engaging as well as demonstrating these muscles so that you know exactly how these muscles are working and how their function is. So I'll keep you posted throughout the PowerPoint, and then you'll see as we go on. So let me just get my cursor here. All right. Okay. So yeah, like I said, we're just going to talk about the forearm. Most of the forearm muscles are going to attach to the ulnar and radius, as well as the lateral or medial epicondyle, depending if it's a flexor or it's an extensor. We'll talk about the branches of the brachial plexus, as well as the arterial supply, which would be ulnar and radial. So like we've talked about in the past few lectures, it's super important to know that the radial nerve is going to supply the entire posterior compartment of your arm, right? So the entire back side of your arm is going to be radial nerve, even the hand, right? But remember, like he said in lecture, there's no muscles on the posterior compartment of the hand, right? So since there's no muscles on the posterior compartment of the hand, that means that the radial nerve is only going to do sensory. So for example, if someone touches the back of your hand, right, you'll feel it. That's because of mostly sensory from the radial nerve. And then you have the anterior compartment of the forearm, which is mostly going to be median nerve. Like we said, I put a huge star here with the exception being the ulnar head of the flexor digitorum profundus. That would be ulnar nerve, as well as flexor carpi ulnaris. The exceptions are pretty easy to remember because they have ulnaris in their name, so it really helps us. So whenever we see flexor carpi ulnaris or ulnar head of flexor digitorum profundus, those are going to be ulnar nerve. And then we also have brachioradialis, which we'll talk about later on. That's going to be the odd one out, but that's going to be innervated by radial nerve. So yeah, because the brachioradialis, it starts posteriorly and it kind of like wraps around your arm. So we'll talk about that and the function of that muscle later on. So he put this again. So he put this on this lecture, I think the lecture before that. So again, I put a ginormous star. I think it's super important to understand every single boundary here, even the anterior as well as posterior side. Definitely testable material. So again, like I said before, and I've been stating, remember to study these two pictures. These are super important. Okay.
Justin, I have a quick question on these slides. When it says medial brachial, is that the medial, like the median nerve and medial side, or is that the musculocutaneous nerve medial side and lateral side?
Yeah. So when we talked about the brachial plexus, these median as well as lateral antebrachial are actually going to be these small cutaneous nerves that are coming off the cords of the brachial plexus. So they're super, super small nerves that's really actually hard to see on like cadaveric images. So that's why he didn't put any images of them. He just wants you to know that they come off the brachial plexus and they supply cutaneously. So just the skin of the forearm on this side as well as the lateral side. So the medial as well as the lateral. So they're just things that are coming off the brachial plexus that are helping provide sensory.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yeah, of course. Okay.
For this slide, all we just need to know is just the brachial nerve that causes sensation, right?
Yep. So yeah, I would know every single nerve that like the median nerve is going to get the first, second, third, and then the half of the third phalange, and then the ulnar nerve will get the other half. So I'll know to like that detail for all of these.
What did you say? You said one time that the lateral antebrachial had something up in the actual arm. It had like the other part of it that it wasn't the terminal. Do you know what I'm talking about or not really?
Not really. Can you clarify a little bit?
Never mind. I think that he just probably stated some random thing and that's what it was. But thank you.
Yeah, no, for sure. He doesn't talk about these too much, like the antebrachial cutaneous and the medial antebrachial cutaneous. The only thing I would know about these two nerves is this picture. I think that's the most important thing. He's not gonna. I doubt he's gonna ask you where these come off of the brachial plexus because there's more important nerves, like the musculocutaneous, axillary, etc. But yeah. Okay, so which nerve innervates the majority of the anterior forearm? Is it going to be ulnar nerve, median nerve, radial nerve, or musculocutaneous nerve?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, of course.
Just a quick clarification.
Yeah.
For the sensory, do we just need to know how to label that picture in the last slide, or?
So I would.
Or just
I would understand where everything is because he's not going to put the picture on the exam. He's going to describe it with detail. Like I said, so he'll be like.
So verbally descriptions. Okay,
yes,
thank you.
Yeah, gotcha. There's a question. So which nerve innervates the majority of the anterior forearm? Give you a few more seconds. Okay. And yes, that is correct. It's going to be the median nerve, right? So B, the median nerve. Exception, it's going to be the ulnar head of the flexor digitorum profundus, and then the flexor carpi ulnaris, right? So they have ulnar in their name. So that's really good to help us remember the exceptions. But yes, the median nerve will be anterior compartment. The radial nerve will be the posterior compartment. We talked about musculocutaneous before. That's going to be the anterior arm. So like where your biceps brachii, coracobrachialis and brachialis, and ulnar nerve, which would be these two exceptions and most of the intrinsic muscles of the hand. So for the arterial supply, we have the radial artery as well as the ulnar artery. These are going to be branches off the brachial artery. So you see right here, this is the brachial artery coming down, and then it bifurcates, right? It bifurcates into the radial artery, which goes down by itself, and then the ulnar artery. But the ulnar artery, I think it's important to note that the common interosseous artery comes off the ulnar artery, not the radial artery. So that's super important to remember. Common interosseous comes off the ulnar artery, and then it's going to branch off into anterior and posterior interosseous. So when they talk about the reason why they call it like interosseous is because there's an interosseous membrane between your ulna and your radius. Like this little membrane that's connecting the ulna and radius together. So what really happens is that this ulnar artery bifurcates into this common interosseous, which is just like a short little artery. It's about like 1 centimeter, I think. And then it's going to break off into anterior and posterior So the anterior is literally going to go to the front side of the interosseous membrane, the membrane that's connecting the radius and the ulna, right? So it's going to go to the front side. The posterior interosseous is just going to go to the back side of the interosseous, which is why they call it posterior interosseous artery, right? And then for radius, remember, also important to note, radius is always on the thumb side. Ulnar is always going to be on your pinky side. Super important to remember that, because if you remember those simple things, then you'll never forget where the radius is, even when you pronate your hand, supinate it, put it in all different angles, because it's always going to be on your thumb side, while the ulna will always be on your pinky side.
Hey, Justin, quick question. So the interosseous membrane connects, did you say the radius and the ulna?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's the same thing that he just talked about here. So it's just brachial artery right here coming down, bifurcating into radial artery, which just keeps coming down, and an ulnar artery. Ulnar artery is going to branch off into common interosseous. This little thing right here is common interosseous. And then you have a posterior and an anterior, which makes sense, right? This is the interosseous membrane, this little white thing, right? Which is going to be connecting the ulna to the radius. So the anterior interosseous is coming to the front side, and the posterior interosseous is going to the back side. These two pictures are a little more complex, but I hope that's going to be able to clarify those. Okay. Okay, and then for the extensors of the wrist, they're going to be on the posterior side. I mean, flexors are going to be on the anterior side. We know that. And then the rotators of the radius. So we'll talk about those, which are going to help with pronation, supination. Those can be on the posterior and anterior. But remember, only the radius moves, right? So your ulnar is always in place. So your radius is the one that is constantly moving. Important to know that so you don't get confused which one is staying stable.
Justin?
Yes.
On the last slide, we don't have to know like those detailed pictures, like the one in the middle, all this stuff?
No.
Okay.
No, yeah, you don't need to know this. The most important thing would just be the branches off the arteries. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Yeah, these pictures are just, I think, too complex, I think, and overwhelming. We should be good. Okay. So the common interosseous branches off the ulnar artery, true or false? All right, so yes, it is true. Remember, you have the brachial artery, which is then bifurcating into the radial artery, and it's also bifurcating into the ulnar artery. The ulnar artery branches off into this little common interosseous, and then the common interosseous branches off into anterior interosseous and posterior. Anterior going to the front side of the interosseous membrane, posterior going towards the posterior side of the interosseous membrane. So I put a little note here, ulnar artery, common interosseous, then going to anterior and posterior interosseous artery. So over here, I would just note that the difference between interosseous membrane and intermuscular septum. Remember, interosseous membrane connects the radius to the ulna. So imagine this being your forearm, this entire yellow circle, right? This would be your forearm. This would be your, let's just say your radius, or let's say your radius and your ulna, and this is going to be your interosseous membrane connecting it. What connects or what separates the anterior from the posterior compartment is actually going to be the intermuscular septum, right? So think about it, just think between two muscles, right? Between the anterior muscles and the posterior muscles is going to be the intermuscular septum, right? And while between the radius and the ulnar is going to be the interosseous membrane, a membrane that connects both of those bones. The anterior compartment, remember we talked about, is mostly going to be median nerve. Exception for ulnar nerve would be flexor carpi ulnaris, as well as the ulnar head of flexor digitorum profundus, right? And then the arterial supply is going to be ulnar artery and radial artery. Remember, anterior interosseous, that comes off the common interosseous, which comes off ulnar artery, right? So on the posterior side, you're also going to have posterior interosseous. Remember, posterior interosseous comes off the common interosseous, which comes off ulnar artery. So technically, this is a branch off the ulnar artery as well, right? And then radial nerve, which we know, we've been talking about that since the arm, right? Which is going to take the entire posterior compartment of the arm. So those are important to know. So I put a little summary slide for you all to remember. Innervation of the flexors is going to be median nerve for most. Exception, like we said, is flexor carpi ulnaris. as well as the ulnar head of flexor digitorum profundus. Those are innervated by ulnar nerve. The arterial supply, remember, is ulnar artery as well as radial artery, right? But no anterior interosseous, which is a branch off the common interosseous, which comes off ulnar artery, right? So which is why I added this note. So those are important to remember. Question?
Hey, Justin.
Yeah.
Could you go back one slide real quick? So for this, is it safe to assume that like for anterior, all flexors are going to be vascularized by ulnar and radial artery, and then all extensors by the posterior interosseous, or are there more specifics to that?
Yeah, so I mean, for in general, most of them would be. It's safe to assume that the muscles that are going to be on the ulnar side, so for example, like flexor carpi ulnaris is most likely going to be supplied by ulnar artery, while like muscles like flexor carpi radialis, which is on the radial side, would most likely be supplied by radial artery. So I would say it's safe to assume, I mean, the interosseous are more so for deeper muscles, because if you think about it, your interosseous membrane is literally connecting your radius and ulna, so that's super deep, right? That's in the bone level. So your anterior interosseous is just superior to the interosseous membrane, so it's going to get most of the deep anterior forearm muscles, while the posterior interosseous will get most of the deep posterior interosseous muscles. But I would just say, assuming that those are going to be for each category, I think is suffice.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah, I got you.
So would he give like a question on that where it's like what artery supplies the flexor digitorum, and then would it be all like all of them, or you just have to like start like rationalizing and thinking about which one would be the best?
Yes. So if he didn't talk about it specifically, because he doesn't talk about the arteries too much, like in regards to like each muscle this one gets this artery, this one gets that one, because it's kind of like variable because you have a bunch of branches coming off of them. But if he was to ask a question like that, it would be pretty obvious. Like he would probably put like anterior interosseous if he's talking about an anterior muscle, and he'll talk about like posterior interosseous if he's talking about a posterior muscle.
Okay, thank you.
Got you. Okay. And then for the extensors, remember radial nerve is taking the entire posterior side of your arm. And then the arterial supply is posterior interosseous artery, remember, which comes off the ulnar artery, right? Well, which comes off common interosseous, which comes off ulnar artery. So I put that note right here. All right. So the intermuscular septum connects the radius to the ulnar, true or false? All right. So yes, it is B. It is false. Remember, the interosseous membrane is going to be connecting the radius to the ulna. I like to put little questions like these sometimes, true or false, just so that when you download the lecture notes, it's kind of like a review, and it gives you like the answers that are going to be correct, right? So the interosseous membrane will connect the radius to the ulna, while the intermuscular septum will separate the anterior compartment from the posterior compartment. So yes, good job. So for the flexors, it's important to note that almost all the flexor tendons and the median nerve are going to run through the flexor retinaculum, which is this thing right here. This is the flexor retinaculum, and almost all the tendons of the forearm are going to run through there, right? So we'll talk about them in great detail, right? So the flexors are going to attach to the medial epicondyle of the humerus. So in this paragraph, the most important thing to remember is that the flexors are going to attach to the medial epicondyle of the humerus, which is just the medial side of your humerus, right? So on your medial side, it should be located right here, right? So following this slide, I actually broke up the forearm muscles into anterior or into superficial, intermediate, and deep. So we actually have 4 superficial, 1 intermediate, and 3 deep. So the best way I like to remember it, because last year this is how I remember the forearm muscles, is that 4 minus 1 equals 3. So you have 4 superficial, 1 intermediate, and 3 deep. And those are going to be your 8 anterior forearm muscles. So I added like little videos in here. They're basically pretty short video segments of me like describing like how these muscles are going to be placed on your arm. And feel free to like follow the video as well as the pictures I put next to it, because if the video does have a little bit of lag, I have pictures next to it so you can like follow along with the lead. So here's the first one. Let me just take my cursor off. Here's the first one. Oh, and it's because I didn't know my camera was gonna work, which is why I made these videos, because my camera hasn't been working. So I was like, I really need to show these people like how the forearm muscles look, but now my camera's working and I'm like, all right, great. But it's fine. I'm still gonna use these videos. All right, so let me know if you can hear it as well, but feel free to follow these pictures right here on the right as well as the left in order to remember these muscles. I'll try to make these videos a little bit short, but since we can't see each other in person, I wanted to make a few videos to help you visualize and demonstrate some of these forearm muscles. So this first segment, I'm actually going to talk about the anterior forearm muscles. So in total, you actually have 8 anterior forearm muscles. It's going to be broken up into 4, 1, and 3. So it's going to be 4 superficial, 1 intermediate, and then 3 deep. So the best way I like to remember it is 4 minus 1 equals 3. So again, you're going to have 4 superficial, 1 intermediate, and 3 deep. So we're going to talk about the 4 superficial first. And the best way to remember that is going to remember pass, fail, pass, fail. So each letter in pass, fail, is going to stand for the muscle. So the best way to remember this is going to be hold your hand up just like so. You can hide your thumb. So this is going to be pass, fail, right? And I'm going to use my thumb to attach to my medial epicondyle of my humerus. So that's going to be located right here. And that's super important because all the flexors, or like almost all the flexors, are going to be attaching to the medial epicondyle of your humerus, right? And you lay your 4 fingers out down just like so, right? So you see it just like this. So the 4 fingers again are going to be pass, fail, pass, fail. So the first P is going to be pronator teres. Pronator teres is going to be attached to your medial epicondyle as well as your coronoid. Pronator teres, which in and of its name says pronator, is going to help with pronation, right? So your pronator teres helps with this motion, which is pronation. So the next one is going to be F. F for fail. So remember, pass, which is pronator teres. Fail, the F is going to stand for flexor carpi radialis. So if you think about the name, flexor, so anterior compartment, carpi, so it's going to insert roughly around the carpal bone areas, and it's going to be radialis, so it's going to be on the thumb side, right? So this is going to be flexor carpi radialis, and that's going to be originating from the medial epicondyle of the humerus, is going to be inserting at the base of the 2nd and 3rd metacarpal, right? So the second right here, 2nd and 3rd metacarpal. So remember, we have our carpal bones, which are located right here. Then you have your metacarpals, which are extending from your palm, and then you have your phalanges, right? So your flexor carpi radialis is going to insert on the base of the 2nd and 3rd metacarpal, right? So your flexor carpi radialis is going to allow for flexion of your wrist, just like so. The next one is going to be pass, right? So pass, fail, pass, which is going to be your palmaris longus. Your palmaris longus goes from your medial epicondyle of your humerus all the way to your palmar aponeurosis, which is located right here. So your palmaris longus doesn't pass your wrist. Since it doesn't pass your wrist, your palmaris longus is only going to assist with flexion of your wrist, right? So just flexion. And then the last one is going to be fail, right? So pass, fail, pass, fail. The last one is going to be flexor carpi ulnaris. So it's going to go from your medial epicondyle of your humerus again, all the way to your 5th metacarpal, pisiform, and hamate, which are just bones that are associated with the 5th metacarpal, which is your pinky, right? So your flexor carpi ulnaris is going to help with flexion of your wrist, right? So again, remember, pass, fail, fail. It's going to be pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and then flexor carpi ulnaris. So I hope this video helps to remember the superficial anterior forearm muscles. Okay, so yeah, so that was the video. I did these videos because I wanted to make it easier to break down these muscles, because throwing 20 muscles at you all is going to be very difficult to like consume at once. So I'm literally going to break it up into segments, as you see throughout the PowerPoint. I did these videos because I thought my camera wasn't working, but I mean, it helps a little bit better because you get like a wide view of the arm. So for the superficial anterior forearm muscles, super important. Remember, you're going to have pass, fail, right? So like we said, I did the same thing. You could have just followed me in the video. You're going to have pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, as well as flexor carpi ulnaris, right? So here they are going to be located right here. And here's a little summary slide for that, right? So superficial anterior forearm muscles. So like I said, if you just follow throughout the video and you just put your thumb on the medial upper condyle, you'll be able to remember the 4 superficial anterior forearm muscles, right? So I put it right here: pass, fail, pass, fail. Pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, which is going, if you think about it, flexor, then going to the wrist because it's carpi, and radialis, so it's going to the thumb side. Then you have palmaris longus and flexor carpi ulnaris, right? So the innervation is going to be the median nerve, right? So median nerve for all of them except flexor carpi ulnaris, right? Flexor carpi ulnaris is actually going to be ulnar nerve, right? So we talked about the superficial anterior forearm muscles. Those are going to be 4, right? And then we're going to actually have 1 intermediate forearm muscle. So again, in total, we're going to have 8 anterior forearm muscles. You have 4 superficial, 1 intermediate, and 3 deep, right? So we talked about the 4 superficial: pass, fail, pass, fail. The 1 intermediate, which we're going to talk about in the next video segment, which would be the flexor digitorum superficialis. So.
Hey, Justin, when you upload these PowerPoints, the videos are going to be with the PowerPoints, right?
Yeah, I'm going to try. I mean, this took up so much memory on my computer, so I hope Canvas can just like upload it, because it's a pretty dense, I guess, like gigabytes. I don't know. It takes a lot of space. So hopefully Canvas does take it. If it does, yeah, I'll be uploading the videos as well.
I mean, I would also subscribe to your YouTube channel.
Okay, if not, then I'll try and find another way to post these videos, but hopefully it could stay on the slides.
Thank you.
Or can you email us to them?
What happened?
Or can you email them to us, hopefully, if it doesn't work on Canvas?
Yeah. I'll figure it out. Hopefully it should be able to upload on Canvas. If not, I'll let you guys know how I can upload these videos.
You're awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Got you. So for the intermediate anterior forearm muscle, remember you have 1. So in this video segment, we're going to just talk about 1 muscle. So it shouldn't be too long. We're going to talk about the intermediate anterior forearm muscle, right? So remember, there's going to be 8 total anterior forearm muscles. It's going to be divided into 4, 1, and 3. So 4 superficial, which was pass, fail, fail. Remember, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris, right? Which is just like this. And then the next one is going to be the intermediate one, right? Which is going to be the 1. So the only intermediate anterior flexor forearm muscle is going to be the flexor digitorum superficialis, right? And that's going to attach from your medial epicondyle as well as your proximal ulna and anterior radius. So it's a pretty large muscle, right? And it's going to extend all the way to your 2nd through 5th phalanges, but only the middle phalanges of your 2nd through 5th phalanges. So your flexor digitorum superficialis is going to attach right here, which is the middle. Okay, this is the middle of your 2nd phalange, middle of your 3rd phalange, middle of your 4th phalange, and middle of your 5th phalange, right? So your flexor digitorum superficialis, since it only attaches to the sides of your middle 2 through 5 phalanges, it's only going to allow flexion like so, which is just like that, flexion like this. When we talk about the flexor digitorum profundus, which is going to be a deep muscle in the anterior forearm, that's going to allow flexion like so. Because the flexor digitorum profundus goes all the way to the end of the, which is going to be the distal phalanges 2 through 5, right? So 2, 3, 4, and 5. But for the flexor digitorum superficialis, which is the intermediate anterior forearm muscle, that's only going to attach to the sides of the middle 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th phalanges. So, and it's only going to allow flexion like this. So I hope this video helps, and that'll be it for the intermediate segment. We're going to, okay, so like I said in the intermediate segment, remember, it's super important to know the difference between the flexor digitorum superficialis and then the muscles underneath that. So like I stated in the video, the flexor digitorum superficialis, as you can see in this picture, only goes to the middle of the phalangeal, the middle of the phalanges, which is right here. As you can see in this picture, right here would be the middle. It doesn't go all the way to the end, right? This would be the distal phalange, right? These little things at the end would be the distal phalange. Since you can't go all the way to the distal phalange, you can't bend the tip of your finger, right? Well, you can't bend the tip of your finger with the flexor digitorum superficialis, right? So it only allow you to flex down like that. It won't let you bend those distal phalanges, right? That's going to be the flexor digitorum profundus, right? So this would be the flexor digitorum superficialis, only going to the middle. So right here, yes.
Real quick, is that the MP joint that the superficialis does, or is it the IP?
It's the interphalange. Yeah, it would be in between the phalanges, so IP.
Okay, and the MP would be the distal or the profundus, the IP joint.
So like these, anything that's IP is going to be between the phalanges. So the phalanges start right here. This would be the proximal phalange. This would be the middle, and this would be the distal phalange. So when I said like middle phalange, it means like this phalange right here, this middle one. So since it doesn't go to the distal, which would be the flexor digitorum profundus, it won't let you like bend your fingertips, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think he was just using like the term like MP and IP in the last slide, and I was confused which one was which.
Yeah, so MP is going to be metacarpal to phalangeal. So that would be right here where my laser pointer is. These are metacarpal to phalangeals. So those aren't going to be too important in regards to the flexor digitorum superficialis. It's more so the middle IP joint.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Gotcha. So here's a little summary slide. So the intermediate anterior forearm muscle. So remember, again, we talked about the superficial. You have in total 8 anterior forearm muscles. It's going to be broken up into 4 minus 1 equals 3. The 4, which would be pass, fail, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and then flexor carpi ulnaris, right? So then the intermediate anterior muscle is going to be the flexor digitorum superficialis. It only goes to the sides of the middle 2 through 5th phalanges, right? But the innervation is still going to be median nerve. So that's why I put a check right here, because it allows you to do this, right? It doesn't allow you to flex these distal parts of your phalanges. That's why this is the flexor digitorum superficialis. I wrote a little X here because this would be the flexor digitorum profundus, allowing you to bend your fingertips, right? So that's going to be the flexor digitorum profundus. And here's the action of the superficialis, right? You can see it bends right here in the middle phalange, but it doesn't bend at the distal phalange, right? This would be the distal phalange. This would be the distal phalange. So it doesn't allow you to bend there because it doesn't reach that far, right? So that'll be the intermediate. And the last segment is going to be the deep anterior forearm muscles, and those are going to be the last 3. And then this is going to be the last segment for the anterior forearm muscles. And then feel free to follow with this image I posted below as well. Okay. The deep forearm muscles, right? So again, in total, we have 8 forearm muscles. It's divided into 4, 1, and 3. So 4 minus 1 equals 3. So the first 4 were the pass, fail, which is going to be pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and then flexor carpi ulnaris. And then the 1, which is going to be the intermediate muscle, was the flexor digitorum superficialis. So for this segment, we're going to talk about the deep anterior forearm muscles, there are going to be 3 of them. So on the more lateral side, so towards your thumb side, we're going to have the flexor pollicis longus, which is actually going to go from your anterior radius, which is going to be, remember, on your thumb side, so anterior radius, so located just around here, as well as your interosseous membrane. So that's going to be the membrane between your radius and your ulna. So it's going to be attaching from there, and your flexor pollicis longus is going to go all the way to your distal phalanx of your thumb. When you hear pollicis, remember, think thumb, right? So flexor pollicis longus is going to help your thumb flex like so, right? So that's your flexor pollicis longus. Right. So the next one, the next deep forearm muscle, which is going to be a little bit more medial, that's going to be your flexor digitorum profundus, which is going to be attaching from your anterior ulna, right, which is on this side, your pinky side, as well as some part of your interosseous membrane, right? And then it's going to go all the way to the distal phalanges of your 2nd through 5th phalanges, right? And it's going to be located right here. So this is your distal phalange. We talked about this in the last segment. So remember, this is going to be your distal phalange of your 2nd phalange. This is your 3rd phalange, distal part. This is your 4th, and this is your 5th. Remember, it goes all the way to the distal end of your phalanges 2 through 5, right? So your flexor digitorum profundus is going to allow for flexion like so, just like that. Remember, the flexor digitorum superficialis, which we talked about in the last segment, is an intermediate forearm muscle. That only goes to the sides of the middle phalanges, which is here, 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 and here, of 2 through 5. So your flexor digitorum superficialis only allows for flexion like this. Your flexor digitorum profundus, which we're talking about, is the deep forearm muscle that allows for flexion like so, because it goes all the way to the end of your distal phalanges 2 through 5, right? So, and then you have one more deep forearm muscle, which is actually going to be your pronator quadratus, which is just like a little square located right here, right? It's going to be originating from your ulna, which is on your pinky side, and attaching to your radius, right? Which is going to be just right here, your radius. And your pronator quadratus, and its name is going to allow for pronation. And that's it. That's all your 8 forearm muscles. So I hope these video segments help. And good luck with your studies. Okay. So those are going to be, that's all your anterior forearm muscles. So we just went through all the anterior forearm muscles in 3 little segments. So when we go into like the slides that Muffley talked about, we'll be able to fly through them a little bit quicker because we understand all the superficial, intermediate, and deep anterior forearm muscles. One little tip I wanted to let you all know was if you look at this picture right here, it kind of helps to remember that. So for flexor pollicis longus, remember it's a flexor, so it's going to flex. It's pollicis, so it's going to be on your thumb, right? And your thumb is on your radius side, right? So your thumb is on your radius side, meaning that your flexor pollicis longus is attached to your radius. So as you can see right here, it's going to be attached to your radius, and it's going to take some portion of the interosseous membrane. And then you see the flexor digitorum profundus over here takes the other portion of the interosseous membrane, as well as the ulna. So they kind of like split the interosseous membrane based on like what they attach. Like one takes one half, and the other takes the other half. But the way I like to remember it is flexor pollicis longus. Think thumb. Thumb is on the radial side, so that means the flexor pollicis longus takes the radius as well as half of the interosseous membrane. And then the flexor digitorum profundus takes the ulna and the other half of the interosseous membrane. So that's going to be that for the deep anterior forearm muscles. Okay, and then this is like a little summary right here. So remember, deep anterior forearm muscles, flexor digitorum profundus. The medial part is actually going to be innervated by ulnar nerve, right? This is the same thing as saying the ulnar head, right? The lateral part is going to be innervated by the median nerve. Flexor pollicis longus, remember, think thumb. Thumb is on the radial side, so that means the flexor pollicis longus is attaching to the radius and taking some part of the interosseous membrane. Your flexor digitorum profundus is attached to your ulna and taking the other half of the interosseous membrane, right? So that's going to be right here. And then you have your pronator quadratus, which is literally a square, which is right here, that little square. So again, I put a little X here because this is flexor digitorum superficialis, and a check here because this is going to be flexor digitorum profundus. So which muscle assists with flexion of the distal part of the second phalange? Little comprehension check question. Yeah, you all are going to be pros with the anterior forearm muscles by the time we do this.
Justin?
Yeah. Yeah?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What muscle covers the anterior side of the radialis, or the radial bone? Sorry. Is it the brachioradialis?
What do you mean by that question? I mean, because there's a lot of muscles that are anterior to the radius.
Okay, so we have the pass fail.
Yep.
And then what would be next to those?
What would be next to that is the brachioradialis, which would be on the lateral. So yeah, that would be on the lateral side. But we'll talk about that later on because it's like it's a weird muscle.
Medial. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Justin, sorry, my mic cut out. I was saying, can you repeat what you said about the square? You said something about a square, but I didn't hear it.
Oh yeah, that just the pronator quadratus is literally a square. This green thing, it would just be a square.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the answer is going to be A. Yes. So yes, good job. You all answered that correctly. It was really good. The distal part of your second phalange would be right here. Right here. So it's going to allow flexion, and that's going to be flexor digitorum profundus. If I said the middle part, it would be flexor digitorum superficialis, right? So here's the summary. Remember, superficial, pass, fail, pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, flexor carpi ulnaris. Intermediate, this would be your flexor digitorum superficialis, which only goes to the middle part of your phalanges. Then you have the deep, remember, flexor pollicis longus. So pollicis, think thumb. Thumb is on the radial side. Thumb is your flexor pollicis longus, attaches to your radius, and it takes some, like half of your interosseous membrane. The flexor digitorum profundus will take the other half of the interosseous membrane as well as the ulna, right? And then you have your pronator quadratus, which is literally a square that is located right here. And all of them are going to be innervated by median nerve, except for flexor carpi ulnaris and the ulnar head of flexor digitorum profundus. So remember, 4 minus 1 equals 3. So 4 superficial, 1 intermediate, and 3 deep. So now we're going to go through the slides. I'm sorry, I added like a bunch of slides, but I wanted to make it like super clear rather than going through like 20 slides or going through 20 muscles in a row. I wanted to like break it down into little segments so it's easier to understand. So we'll fly through these a little bit quickly because we talked about them throughout the slides. So we'll be talking about the flexors here. Yeah, so we'll go. Remember, medial epicondyle of the humerus, like we talked about, that's going to be super important to remember for the flexors.
Justin, quick question.
Yes.
So they're all vascular, or the flexors are vascularized by the anterior interosseous artery or artery.
Yeah, so most of them.
Or...
It's kind of variable because I would like the anterior interosseous is like almost attached. It's not attached, but it's just superficial to the interosseous membrane. So that's going to take most of the deep ones, probably like flexor pollicis longus and flexor digitorum profundus, while the ulnar artery might take like the more superficial ones, right? Which would be like the flexors over here, like the pass fail, pass fail. I mean, it's a little variable, which is why I said like I don't know how he'll test this, but just knowing that anterior interosseous and ulnar artery would mostly be anterior and posterior interosseous is going to be for the extensors, I think should be suffice.
Thank you.
Yep. So we're going to be talking about the flexors like we've been talking about throughout this lecture. Remember, medial epicondyle of your humerus. That's going to be your flexors. So here's your pass fail, pass fail. He didn't put the first pass because pronator teres, it pronates. He wanted to put like pronators in their own category, but like here, this would be your pronator teres, right? Well, you can't see it, but it would be located right here. This would be your pronator teres. Then you have your flexor carpi radialis. Remember, that's going to go from your medial epicondyle to the base of your second and third metacarpal. So it's only going to allow for a flexion of your metacarpum. He said in class as well, remember, if you pull on the flexor carpi radialis, just think about it. It's pulling on the thumb side, right? So it's also going to cause your wrist to turn to the thumb side, right? So you know how you can turn your wrist like side to side? That's because of your flexor carpi radialis as well as your flexor carpi ulnaris, which is attached like on opposite sides. So not only do they help with flexion, they also help with like turning your wrist slightly to the side that they're on, right? So that makes sense, right? Because the flexor carpi radialis, if it pulls, it's also going to pull your thumb this way, right? So it allows you to move your wrist that way. But mostly it's just going to be a flexor, right? So insert to the base of your second and third metacarpal. Palmaris longus, remember palmar aponeurosis, which is going to be located right here. And not everyone has a palmaris longus. I guess that was just a cool fact that he said. And then flexor carpi ulnaris, which would be on the ulnar side, which is your pinky. And that's going to be associated with your pisiform, your hamate, and your fifth metacarpal, right? So we've talked about these throughout the slides, so it should be quite familiar to us. So here is our famous pass fail, pass fail. This is our pass, pronator teres, right? This would be pronator teres right here. This would be our fail, flexor carpi radialis, right here. Then we'll have our next pass right here, which is palmaris longus. This would be your palmaris longus. And then this right here, this over here would be the fail, which would be flexor carpi ulnaris, right? So pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris, right? And then this muscle right here, that's square muscle. Remember, that's the pronator quadratus, right? So if you see a square, it's most likely going to be pronator quadratus. So it's pretty easy to identify. So again, over here, so if you point it out, here's the flexor carpi radialis. Your pronator teres would be over here. You can't see it too well, but this would be your first pass. So pronator teres. This would be your flexor carpi radialis. So you're here fail. They actually cut the palmaris longus, so you can't see it here, but you can see it on this one. So they cut it off. And then you have your flexor carpi ulnaris on this side, right? And then this would be your palmar aponeurosis. This is where the palmaris longus attaches to, on the palmar aponeurosis. So which muscle is the most medial on the anterior forearm? The pronator teres, the brachioradialis, the flexor carpi ulnaris, or the palmaris longus? Think about your pass, fail, pass, fail. It's going from lateral to medial. Okay, so yes, the answer is flexor carpi ulnaris. So remember, we have our pass, fail, pass, fail. So if you lay your hand out just like this, your pinky is the most medial one, right? So that's going to be your flexor carpi ulnaris. So going from lateral to medial.
I'm in class.
So going from lateral to medial, it would be pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and then flexor carpi ulnaris. Remember, flexor carpi ulnaris will be the most medial one, right? So yeah, and here is going to be your flexor digitorum superficialis. Remember, this is the intermediate forearm muscle. So we had 4 minus 1 equals 3. This would be 1. The way to identify the flexor digitorum superficialis on the cadaver is quite easy, because the flexor digitorum superficialis is like a ginormous muscle. Like, it's huge because it attaches to your ulna and your radius, so it takes up most of the part of your arm once you remove your pass, fail, right? Because those would be your superficial ones. So once you remove your pass, fail, you'll be able to see the flexor digitorum superficialis, right? So it attaches to the ulna as well as the anterior radius, right? So you can see it over here, ulna and radius. And remember, I put a star here, middle phalanges. Remember, middle phalanges of 2nd through 5, so it allows you to do this, right? So it allows you to do this, not this, right? And then you have your flexor pollicis longus, which is a deep one. Remember, we talked about the deep ones. Your flexor pollicis longus will be one of them. And it's going to go from your, remember I said pollicis, think thumb, think radius. So it's going to attach to your radius, and it's going to take the half of the interosseous membrane. Remember, the flexor digitorum profundus takes the other half of the interosseous membrane and the ulna, right? So this would be the flexor pollicis longus, and it attaches to the base of your distal phalanx of your thumb, right? Because it's going to flex your thumb, right? So it's going to go all the way to the distal end. That's that one. And then here's your flexor digitorum superficialis, right? You see how large the muscle is, right? It's like ginormous. So it's attaching to your radius as well as your ulna, as you can see right here. So this will be your flexor digitorum superficialis, covering almost your entire arm. And it's going to allow for only flexion at the middle phalanges. Remember, only flexion at the middle phalanges. Like we said, helpful tip, it attaches to the ulna and the radius, so it's a pretty large muscle. So that can help you identify the flexor digitorum superficialis. And you can see right here, it only attaches to the middle phalanges, right? Middle. Over here would be the distal phalange. That would be flexor digitorum profundus. And what's super cool about this, like this image right here, is if you go into the Gross lab, you can actually see the flexor digitorum profundus, which would be right here, piercing through right here, the flexor digitorum superficialis. So this right here, if you can see, this corner, like this V structure basically that you see, the outside part of that, which is right here, would be your flexor digitorum superficialis. That ends at your middle phalange. This part right here that's piercing through and going all the way to the distal end is actually a flexor digitorum profundus. So it's super cool to see that, and that's how it would look in a cadaver. So for flexor pollicis longus, remember that's one of our deep muscles. So we have 3 deep muscles. Remember, flexor pollicis longus, flexor digitorum profundus, and then your square pronator quadratus. So remember, if we think flexor pollicis longus, think thumb, because pollicis for thumb, right? Thumb is on the radial side, so you can see this is attaching to the radius, right? This is the radius right here. And it's taking half of the interosseous membrane. You can't see because obviously there's muscles over it, but it's going to be taking half of the interosseous membrane. That's going to be flexor pollicis longus, right? So here they are pointing at the tendon right here, right? So you should be able to know, like if he probably won't test you like that, but if he just posted a picture like this and pointed at this tendon, you have to know that's flexor pollicis longus, because that's the only flexor that's on your anterior side of your arm flexing your pollicis, right? So your thumb. He probably won't ask you like that. I think that's a little savage, but if he did, it would be flexor pollicis longus, right? This one right here. So allows for flexion of your thumb. It's right here. And then we'll talk about this one, but this one would be your flexor digitorum profundus, which we'll talk about when it comes up. Okay, so here's another comprehension check question. So which muscle is this? The one pointed at by the arrow, that little pink arrow, I think. A, B, C, or D?
Hey, Justin, quick question for
Yeah.
the exam. The cadaver picks on the arm or forearm and hand are equivalent likelihood as the brachial plexus to appear?
Yes, all of them are as likely to appear on the exam.
Does he usually have maybe 5 questions that have pictures or 1 or 2? Like, what's the ratio usually?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's going to be too many. Like he said in class, like he said it's not going to be too many pictures. I mean, I wouldn't put it past 5 to 7, I think. I mean, don't take my word for it, but I would definitely study the pictures because pictures are like straight identifying or like knowing like what the innervation is. So you don't want to get it wrong because you can't identify it. So yeah, I would definitely study these pictures to the T as well. This is why I'm like trying to give you like helpful tips to like ease through all these pictures. But yeah, I hope that helps. Yeah, of course. So this is gonna be your, like we said, you guys got it right, your palmaris longus. You see how it helps to remember your pass, fail, because you see this image and you're like, oop, I see the pass, fail. Pass, which is pronator teres, fail, which would be flexor carpi radialis, and then pass, palmaris longus, and then right here would be the fail, flexor carpi ulnaris. It's kind of like counting at this point when you remember. So that's going to help you all remember those anterior forearm muscles. And this right here is your pronator quadratus, right? This square, pronator quadratus. Okay, and then flexor digitorum profundus, which we've talked about over and over again. It's going to be going to the distal ends of your phalanges 2 through 5. Remember, distal. So since it goes to the distal, I put a check mark right here, allowing you to do this, and an X right here because this would be, or a stop, because this would be flexor digitorum superficialis, right? So remember, your flexor digitorum profundus shares half of the interosseous membrane with your flexor pollicis longus, right? Like we said, remember, flexor pollicis longus, think thumb. Thumb is on the radial side, so that'll help you remember that the flexor pollicis longus attaches to the radius. It's a deep one, so it takes the interosseous membrane, half of it, and then here's your flexor digitorum profundus, taking the other half of the interosseous membrane, and then as well as the ulna, and going to the 4 phalanges, so the phalanges 2 through 5, right? So here's your flexor digitorum profundus. So I would also like to state, whenever they say like digitorum, it's almost 90% of the time going to all 4 of your phalanges, right? So when you think flexor digitorum, or when you think anything that's like saying digitorum, it's talking about going to like multiple fingers most of the time. So flexor digitorum profundus, it's going to your 4 fingers, right? So you would assume that eventually it's going to branch off into 4 tendons, right? Because you got to have a tendon for each finger, right? Which is why you have multiple tendons right here, right? So this entire thing right here would be flexor digitorum profundus, right? It's kind of weird to look at because you see multiple tendons, but you have to realize that flexor digitorum profundus goes to 4 fingers, right? So eventually it's going to split off into 4 different tendons, but they classify it as one muscle, which is why this entire thing right here would be your flexor digitorum profundus. Does that make sense? And then this over here would be your flexor pollicis longus. Remember, the other muscle that's taking the other half of the interosseous membrane, as well as your radius. So this would be your flexor pollicis longus, right there. Flexor pollicis longus. And then this entire thing right here would be flexor digitorum profundus. And it goes all the way to the distal phalange right here. And it allows you to do that. Pronator teres right here. Oh, question?
Yeah. So I think I got confused like 2 questions ago. So I just want to like clarify something. Mm-hmm. So the white piece, okay, with the muscle, let's say like the palmaris longus, for example, or like how we're doing the pass fail, like at the top are the muscles, but as they extend down into the hand, they become tendons extending off of the muscle.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so he could still click on the tendon and then be like, what is that? It's still the same muscle. So you have to know, like if he puts over here, what is this? You still know it's palmaris longus, right? Even though it's the tendon of the palmaris longus. Oh, my bad, I meant over here. He could put like this, but you know this is palmaris longus, even though it's the tendon of the palmaris longus, right?
Okay, yeah, that's why I thought it was like the most middle one at first, because like the tendon, it goes straight to the middle. The palmaris, that's why I thought it was like the most medial, but that was based on the tendon aspect of it, not like the muscle aspect of it, which makes sense.
Yeah, yes. Okay. And then we have our pronators, which we've talked about, the pronator teres, which is part of our, oh, can I point out the profundus again? Yes. So this entire thing right here, so this is the top part of it. And this entire thing right here is your flexor digitorum profundus, right? So if you wanted to, you can actually count 4 tendons. It's hard here, but it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Eventually, it's going to branch off into 4 tendons to go to your 4 fingers, right? So this entire thing would be your flexor digitorum profundus. Okay. So pronator teres, remember, important to remember that it attaches to the coronord process of your ulnar. That gets a little confusing because remember we talked about core cord process of your scapula, right? But remember, coronord process is on your ulna. Your pronator teres attaches to your coronord process, right? It attaches to the coronord process of your ulna. I put a star there because I felt like that was pretty important. And then pronator quadratus is going to be this little square, right? It's a little square that just helps with pronation. So these both are going to be pronators. All right. And here's your pronator teres. I feel like your pronator teres is pretty easy to define, which helps us because it just like comes across like this, right? It ends right here, and this would be your pronator teres. Of course, they took off like the rest of the fail, pass, like the pass, fail, which is why you can't see it over here. But this would be your pronator teres. Here is your little square. So if you see a square on the exam, you got to think, okay, pronator quadratus. Like if you see this square, it's pronator quadratus. It just helps with pronation of your hand, of your arm and your hand. That's pronator quadratus. So which muscle is this? Here's another comprehension check question. Flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, flexor carpi ulnaris, or flexor digitorum superficialis? I'll give you a few more seconds. Okay. So yes, it's going to be your flexor digitorum superficialis. So the best way I like to see is if I see it's the anterior forearm, right? The first thing I'm thinking about is pass, fail, pass, fail. If I don't see pass, fail, then most likely I'm not seeing those 4 anterior forearm muscles, right? So I can move down. Now I think, okay, there's 1 intermediate. If I see 1 ginormous muscle like this, remember, there's only 1 intermediate, so this has to be flexor digitorum superficialis. And if you don't see flexor digitorum superficialis, the bottom ones are going to be flexor pollicis longus and flexor digitorum profundus. Remember, which are the ones that are sharing the interosseous membrane, right? So if you see 2 muscles kind of splitting and sharing the interosseous membrane, then you know you're looking at the anterior deep forearm, so the deep anterior forearm. So that's the way I like to think about it when I see these images. So yes, great job, flexor digitorum superficialis. Helpful tip, it attaches to the ulnar radius. It's a very large muscle. Okay, so that was all of our flexors. So I actually inputted video segments for the extensors as well. I mean, I broke them up, I think, into 6 and 5. So like 6 superficial and like 5 deep. I think it was like that. So I have a couple of video segments for that as well. And then again, if there's lag, remember, I think I have a picture associated with them as well. So feel free to like use that picture to follow along. And I am going to say a couple of things to like help you remember them because there are a lot of extensors. There were 8 anterior forearms and there's actually going to be 12 extensors. So we'll be going through the extensors as well, or 12 posterior compartment, right? Is the flexor digitorum superficialis superficial or deep to the pass fail? It's deep. It's deep. So the pass fail is like the superficial part. Then you have your intermediate, which is going to be the flexor digitorum superficialis, which is under those. And then under that, you have your deep ones, which would be 3, flexor pollicis longus, flexor digitorum profundus, and then pronator quadratus, which would be that little square, right? So did that help? Okay. So here are going to be the extensors. Also important to note, extensors are going to be on the lateral epicondyle of your humerus. Remember, we talked about flexors being on the medial epicondyle of your humerus. Extensors are going to be on the lateral epicondyle, right? Right there, lateral epicondyle. Okay, and here are all of them, which is why I broke them up because I feel like this is a lot of muscles to go over, and they start sounding the same. So I broke them up for you all to help you remember them. Okay, so feel free to follow on this image if you have any sort of lag, or if you want to just follow along, feel free. Okay. I'm going to be talking about the superficial extensor muscles that are going to be coming from lateral to medial. So I'll start by naming them from lateral to medial and give you a couple of tips that are going to help you to remember it. So I'm going to hold my arm up like this so it's easy for me to show you all where these muscles are located. So the first extensor muscle that you're going to see from lateral to medial is going to be your extensor carpi radialis longus. So remember, those are going to, or most of the extensor muscles are going to originate from your lateral epicondyle of your humerus, which is right here, lateral epicondyle. So your extensor carpi radialis longus is the first muscle that you see on the lateral side. I'm not including the brachioradialis because I'm going to give it the brachioradialis its own segment, as well as the anconius. So your extensor carpi radialis longus, which goes from your lateral epicondyle of your humerus all the way towards your thumb side, right? And is going to allow for extension. The next one is going to be your extensor carpi radialis brevis. So to remember that the longus is going to be lateral, think L for longus and L for lateral. So that'll help you remember that the extensor carpi radialis longus is on the lateral side, and then you have the extensor carpi radialis brevis, which is slightly medial. The next one, we just talked about the thumb because these were all going to be on the radial side, so you can hide your thumb. So now we have 4 fingers up. So that helps us remember the next muscle, which is going to be slightly medial, is going to be the extensor digitorum. The extensor digitorum goes from the lateral epicondyle of your humerus all the way to the ends of your phalanges 2 through 5. And it's going to help with extension of those 4 fingers, right? Which is why we're holding 4 fingers up right now. So we just talked about those 4 fingers. So now we have 1 left, and we're talking about, this will help us remember that it's going to be the next muscle, which is going to be a little bit slightly more medial, is going to be the extensor digiti minimi. So we're like, because to help us remember that, we have our pinky up. That's our digiti minimi, right? And that's going to be attaching from our lateral epicondyle of your humerus. It's going to be extending all the way to the end of your digiti minimi, or your pinky. So it's going to help with extension of your pinky. And your last muscle that you're going to find on the most medial side is going to be your extensor carpi ulnaris. And that's going to be coming from your lateral epicondyle, and it's going to be going all the way towards your ulnar side, right? So like your pinky side. Remember, your ulnar is on your pinky side. And that's going to be the most medial muscle. So again, from lateral to medial, you have your extensor carpi radialis longus. Remember, the next one is going to be extensor carpi radialis brevis, which is slightly more medial. Remember, longus for lateral. After that, we just talked about the thumb because those were the radialis, so we can hide our thumb. Now we have 4 fingers up. That can help us remember the next muscle is going to be the extensor digitorum, which is going to go to the ends of these 4 fingers and going to allow for extension. Now we talked about the 4 fingers. We have 1 left, and that's going to be our extensor digiti minimi, which is going to be the muscle that is slightly medial to the extensor digitorum, coming from the lateral epicondyle as usual, going all the way to the end of your pinky and allowing for extension. And then the most medial muscle is going to be your extensor carpi ulnaris, which goes from your lateral epicondyle again, all the way towards your pinky side or your ulnar side. So I hope this helps. That's going to be the superficial muscles. And the next one, we'll talk about the deep muscles of the extensors. All right. So those are going to be the superficial muscles, right? So I wanted to break them up into like 5 or 6 superficial muscles, and then we'll talk about the deeper muscles. I didn't include the brachioradialis because it's a little bit weird because it goes from the posterior side and it kind of wraps around your arm, but I did add a segment video for that to help you all learn about the brachioradialis. But like we said, these are little helpful tips to remember. Extensor carpi radialis longus is on the lateral side, right? So then the next one is going to be extensor carpi radialis brevis. Then you have 4 fingers up, extensor digitorum, right? Now you have 1, extensor digiti minimi, and then the most medial one, extensor carpi ulnaris. It's important to note that we have an extensor digitorum. Remember when we talked about on the flexor side, we had flexor digitorum superficialis and flexor digitorum profundus. Well, we only have an extensor digitorum because it goes all the way to the distal ends of your phalanges on the backside, right? So there's no need to have another muscle, right? Because it already goes to the ends, which is why you only have 1 extensor digitorum, right? So that would be that. I'm going to be talking. Okay. And then here, so he puts all the muscles here. We didn't talk about these because these are the deeper muscles. But if we remember from the video, remember extensor carpi radialis longus, that's on the lateral side, right? And then you're going to have extensor carpi radialis brevis, right? After that, you're going to have extensor digitorum, right? Because we just talked about the thumb side. You can hide your thumb. Now you have your 4 fingers up. That's going to help you remember that the next muscle, just medial to that, is going to be extensor digitorum. And after that, we talked about those 4. We have our pinky up, extensor digiti minimi, which is this skinny muscle right here, going all the way to the end of your distal pinky. And then you have your extensor carpi ulnaris, which should be right here, extensor carpi ulnaris. Right? So those are going to be your superficial extensor muscles. And we'll talk about the deep ones later. So here's the extensors of the wrist. Remember, so this would be your extensor carpi radialis longus. Remember, for lateral. Extensor carpi radialis brevis, which would be just slightly medial to that. It's hard to identify the difference on this image because even when he went over it, he was like kind of like just going right through it. So I don't know if he's going to test you like which one's the longest, which one's the brevis based off of this picture because it's pretty hard. But if he does point at something that's super lateral, then you can assume that's going to be the longest. And if it's a little slightly more medial, it'll be the brevis, right? But this entire thing right here will be that. This would be the extensor carpi ulnaris. They removed the muscles all in between. You can see they removed those muscles. And this would be the most medial one, extensor carpi ulnaris. It's going towards the pinky side. So that's how you know it's going to be the extensor carpi ulnaris. Right, so he added these little right here. This is where, this blue dot right here is where the extensor carpi radialis longus attaches to, right? So it's closer to the thumb. This blue dot right here would be where the extensor carpi radialis brevis attaches to, right? Which is the one that's slightly more medial. And then you're going to have over here, extensor carpi ulnaris, right? So those are going to be those. And this is going to be the extensor retinaculum.
Hey, Justin.
Yeah.
Going back to the last slide. So
Yeah.
what would be the giveaway that that's on the posterior side? And like, say you're left or right, so you can know radius ulna and then be able to pinpoint which is which.
Yeah, so it is quite difficult to see which side is which I'm hoping he'll like put these images on there, which would be these additional ones to show you that it attaches to the lateral epicondyle, and you can see it's attaching to the posterior side of the hand. So I'm hoping he puts those pictures up, but if he doesn't, you would just have to assume that like this is the thumb side, so you can see it's like bridging up, right? So that would be like the thumb, and this is going to be the pinky side. So then you know this is going to be the posterior side of your arm, right? So it's kind of like that, right? So I know it's hard to identify in this picture, so this one might be like one you have to memorize that this is the posterior side of your arm. What also helps is that this doesn't look like the pass fail, right? So like you would know that this is not going to be the anterior side of the arm either, right? It doesn't look like 4 muscles coming across, right? So this would be your posterior side of your arm. So I hope those tips help a little bit. I'm hoping he puts these images as well, but if he doesn't, you would have to memorize this. This is the posterior side of the arm. Does that help?
Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Question?
Yeah, for this, the insertions and origins, would he put like a picture like that and say like, where does the muscle insert? Like, would he actually put this image of the blue, I guess blue dots? Would he put that on the exam?
Well, I hope he would put the blue dots in the exam to help you guys know where this muscle is located. But that's what I'm saying.
I'm saying like without just like a random, just this picture right here.
Oh, like would he just post this?
Yeah, would he just post that?
That's low yield. Like I don't think he's gonna post that. I mean, he could, but there's so many muscles that he can ask. Like I doubt he's gonna be like, what attaches there? I mean, he could, but it's. I mean, if you just think about it logically, you're like, okay, this is the posterior side of the hand, so we're only talking about extensors, right? And this blue dot is the most lateral one. If it's the most lateral one, it has to be the extensor carpi radialis longus. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's gonna be, I think, a little bit of a reach. It could happen, but I don't think he's gonna, like ask a question just based on that picture. Okay. So here's your extensor digitorum. Remember what I said about digitorum. Think about, okay, it's going to like these 4 fingers, right? It's also called the communis. But this is gonna be your extensor digitorum. You can see it branches off into eventually 4 tendons, right? We can't see too well over here, but it's going to eventually branch off into 4 tendons. So this right here would be your extensor digitorum, right? Eventually going to all 4 of your fingers and allowing for extension, right? That's going to be your extensor digitorum. Right here, remember we talked about the 4 muscles, like we said, like I showed you in the lecture. When we talk about the extensor digitorum, we hide the rest and we only have the pinky left. that helps us remember that the extensor digiti minimi is the muscle that's slightly medial to the extensor digitorum, right? Which is going to be located right here. This little muscle right here is extensor digiti minimi, right? Extensor digiti minimi. And then extensor indices, which we'll talk about. He'll put another picture of that, which we'll talk about when we talk about the deep ones. So I'll get back to that when the picture comes up again. Oh, so here's the last video segment before we talk about the brachioradialis, and this is just talking about the deep forearm muscles of the extensors. Question?
Yeah, Justin,
Yeah.
On that last slide,
Yeah.
is the extensor radialis longus, is that present? Can you see that in this picture at the top?
So extensor radialis longus, these two pictures, no. But this one, no. I don't think you can see it, no. Because these right here would be your deep ones, which we'll talk about. This is your anatomical snuff box, which we'll talk about later on. Right here. But yeah, no, you can't see it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Justin, off of
Yes.
that picture for the extensor digiti minimi, is it the one that's all the way to the bottom or the one that's right above it? Because I'm not really sure what it's pointing at there.
Yeah, so this right here, do you see this tendon right here? Well, my laser, yeah, so that tendon right there, this muscle that's following that tendon is extensor digiti minimi.
Okay, thank you.
It's super skinny. I know it's hard to see, but that would be it. So if he points at, he would most likely point at the tendon because that's an easier way to identify that muscle. Gotcha. All right. So, and then here's going to be the deep forearm extensor muscles. So this will be the last one we talk about before we talk about the brachioradialis and the anaconeus. So here's one of the last video segments. All right. Hi, everybody. So for this segment, we're actually going to be talking about the deep posterior forearm muscles. So we're actually going to be talking about 5, and I'm actually going to start with the supinator. So the supinator is actually going to be attaching from your lateral epicondyle, right? So this is your lateral epicondyle of your humerus, as well as some of the joint capsule, and as well as some part of the proximal ulna, which is over here. Remember, ulna is on the pinky side, right? So pinky side is going to be the ulna, and then the thumb side is going to be the radius. So it's going to have some attachment to the ulna. But distally, the supinator is going to attach to the proximal third of the radius. So roughly right here. Remember, radius is on the thumb side. So roughly right here. So you can imagine your supinator. So if I put my arm out like this and I pronate my hand, right? What's going to happen is that my supinator is going to be extended farther than it wants. So when the supinator contracts, it's going to pull the arm and supinate it. So that's going to be the action of the supinator. So the supinator and the pronator teres are actually going to act opposite. So as the pronator teres pronates, for example, the supinator is then going to supinate on the other side. So they basically go back and forth. So the next, but remember, the pronator teres is on the anterior side, right? So the next deep forearm muscle that's going to be on the posterior side that we're going to talk about, we just talked about the supinator. The next one that we're going to talk about, or the next couple, the next 4 are actually going to be going from lateral to medial, right? So we'll talk about them from lateral to medial. Remember, thumb side is radial side, which is lateral. Pinky side is ulnar side, which is medial. So on the lateral side, the most lateral, deep posterior forearm muscle that we're going to talk about is going to be the anatomical snuff box. So specifically, the first muscle that's going to be on the lateral side is going to be the abductor pollicis longus. So abductor pollicis longus. So it's going to abduct the pollis, which is the thumb, and it's called a longus, right? So it's going to, this is abduction of the thumb, right? So bringing it away from the plane of field. So if you make a C, for example, that's abduction of your thumb, right? It's going to be your abductor pollicis longus, right? So that'll be the first one of your anatomical snuff box. That's the one that's the most lateral. Then the one that's going to be slightly more medial to that is going to be your extensor pollicis brevis, right? So your extensor pollicis brevis is going to be slightly more medial. Your extensor pollicis brevis is actually going to allow for extension of your thumb just like this. It's only going to allow for extension of your thumb like this because it doesn't go to the distal end of your thumb. Since the extensor pollicis brevis doesn't go to the distal end of your thumb, it's only going to allow for extension like this, right? Extension like that. The next one, so again, so from lateral to medial, we talked about abductor pollicis longus, extensor pollicis brevis, and the next one, which is going to be the last part of the muscle, part of the anatomical snuff box, is going to be the extensor pollicis longus, right? So it's going to be extensor pollicis longus. So that's going to actually go to the end of your thumb, so it's going to allow for extension of your thumb like that, right? So flicking up the thumb. That's your extensor pollicis longus. So again, from lateral to medial, you're going to have your abductor pollicis longus, right? That's going to be the most lateral muscle of your anatomical snuff box. So it allows for abduction of your thumb like this. Then you're going to have slightly more medial to that, extensor pollicis brevis, which allows for extension of your thumb like that because it only goes to the middle. It doesn't go to the end of your thumb. And the last one, which is going to be more medial to that, is going to be your extensor pollicis longus, which allows for the flicking up of the thumb because it goes all the way to the distal end of your thumb. And then one more deep forearm muscle, which is going to be slightly more medial, is actually going to be your extensor indices. So which is going to be extending your index finger, right? So extensor indices, which is the most medial one, extension of your index finger. And those are going to be your deep forearm muscles. So I hope this segment helped, and good luck with your studies. Okay. So those are going to be the deep ones. Excuse me. So yeah, so we went over all the forearm muscles, right? The only ones we're missing are the brachioradialis as well as the anconeus, which I put like a minute segment on it in the next few slides. But the best way to remember the anatomical snuff box is actually going to be calling it a brevis sandwich. So I put the picture right here to help you remember, because like I showed you in the video, the one that's the most lateral is the abductor pollicis longus, right? So you can see that in that image. It's going to allow for that C, right? So it's going to allow for you to abduct your thumb. The middle one is going to be your extensor pollicis brevis, which is why we call it a brevis sandwich, right? Because it's going to be two longuses inside of a brevis, right? Or two longuses outside of a brevis, which is why they call it a brevis sandwich. So the extensor pollicis brevis, that'll help you remember that that's the middle muscle in the anatomical snuff box. And it's only going to allow extension like this, right? Because it only goes to the middle of your thumb, which would be located over here, the middle. And then the extensor pollicis longus, which will go all the way to the end and allow flicking. It's kind of like the same thing as like we talked about with the flexor digitorum superficialis only doing this, and the flexor digitorum profundus doing this. It's kind of the same thing on the thumb. When the extensor pollicis brevis does this, extensor pollicis longus does this, right? So those are going to be the deep forearm muscles on the posterior side. Okay, so let's see. Oh, okay. So yeah, we talked about most of these. Remember, this is our anatomical snuff box right here. Here's our question. Is there a question? Oh, okay. So here's going to be our anatomical snuff box. This is the brevis sandwich, right? The brevis sandwich, which is going to be, I think somebody's mic's on. Okay, there you go. So abductor pollicis longus, which is going to be on the more lateral side, right? So you can see right here, abductor pollicis longus. Here's your extensor pollicis brevis, right? So you can see if you follow this muscle, right? You follow, you see it ends right here. So since it ends right here at the middle, it's only going to allow for extension of your thumb like that, right? It can't flick the tip of your thumb because it doesn't go to the end. That's your extensor pollicis brevis. Your extensor pollicis longus, which is right here, extensor pollicis longus, look, you can see it goes all the way to the end of your thumb. So it allows for you to flick your fingertip, right? So, yeah, so if you were to sever, for example, your extensor pollicis longus, you won't be able to flick the fingertip of your thumb, right? Because there's no other muscle that goes to the distal part of your thumb, right? And then the most medial one would be the extensor indices muscle, which simply just extends your index finger. So that's going to be those. And then here's your extensor digitorum. We talked about this before. There's going to be 4 tendons coming off, so this would be your extensor digitorum. Then you have this is your anatomical snuff box over here, which we'll get a better picture of that. This would be your digitorum, this entire ginormous muscle. And this would be your extensor digiti minimi, right? So if you follow this tendon, you can see it's going to the pinky, right? This tendon right here, it's going to the pinky. So you can see that this is going to be the extensor digiti minimi. And your extensor indices would be located right here. Very hard to see, but if you follow this tendon right here, it would be a muscle that's like deep to that right here. That would be your extensor indices. Yes, because in order to see your extensor indices, you'll have to like move over your extensor digitorum, which is right here, your extensor digitorum. So if you can see that the extensor digitorum is being moved, the thing that he's most likely pointing at is going to be the extensor indices muscle. But that's the only muscle that's left there. So here's your anatomical snuff box, right? So like we said, this is our brevis sandwich, right? Our brevis sandwich. So if we go from lateral to medial, this is your abductor pollicis longus, right? This right here. This muscle, will be your abductor pollicis longus. Then you have your extensor pollicis brevis, because remember, two longuses, there's a brevis inside of two longuses. Extensor pollicis brevis, which is this muscle, this one right here. It allows for extension like this, right? It doesn't go all the way to the end, so it doesn't allow for the fingertip to flick up. And then right here, this muscle is your extensor pollicis longus, which allows for the flicking of the thumb. And yes, those would be those. So here's another comprehension check question. So which muscle is the one that the black arrow is pointing to? Is it the extensor digitorum, extensor carpi radialis, extensor digiti minimi, or extensor indices?
Hey, Justin.
Yeah.
So a question like this is fair game because I feel like it's hard to tell where is like your radius and ulnar being able to tell medial lateral sides.
You're asking if this question would be fair game, just like pointing that out? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just because I feel like it's really hard to tell. There's no like way to tell where your ulna and radius are, so it's just kind of tricky.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But if you remember, if you see these muscles over here, you don't have muscles like this on the flexor compartment, right? You don't have muscles coming across your radius like that on the thumb side. This is your so if you knew that this was your anatomical snuff box, then you know that this is going to be the posterior side of your arm. You see what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
All right. So it's like very small details that like if you know like how everything looks like, then you'll be able to identify that this is the posterior side. Does that help?
Oh yeah, a lot. Thanks, man.
Okay, gotcha.
Anatomical snuff box again?
Oh, question, what happened?
Oh, can you point out the anatomical snuff box again on the picture?
Yeah, this picture doesn't do us much justice. I feel like it's a little bit harder to see it. But over here, this is your abductor pollicis longus, right?
Uh-huh.
Then you have your extensor pollicis brevis, which is this muscle right here. This one. And then you have your extensor pollicis longus, which would be this muscle coming across. The tendon will go all the way over here. This would be your extensor pollicis longus. Does that help?
Oh, I was asking where the snuff box was. Is it in between?
That is the snuff box.
Oh, that's the snuff. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Oh, yeah. That is my bad. Yeah, that is the snuff box. This entire thing would be the snuff box. So like this area, technically, I guess would be the snuff box. So if you extend your thumb really far back, you can see like that little hole there. This would be like this little hole.
Right okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Justin, can you move the arrows a little bit from where he had them in this slide?
Can I move them? What do you mean?
Did you so like I'm looking at my slides I printed out from Dr. Muffley and I don't know, I thought that I got everything lined up when I printed them out. I know sometimes they move, but it just looks like the arrows are in different places on your slide.
Oh, no, I didn't move them, so I have no idea. But is it pointing to the same muscle though, or that's on yours?
All of them except the extensor pollicis longus, and for whatever reason, I have blue arrows. I don't know, man.
That's odd. Yo, what? Okay, I don't know. I don't think I even touched this image other than adding this. That's weird. Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I mean, just know that this is gonna be the abductor. This would be the extensor pollicis longus, and then this one right here would be the extensor pollicis. Oh, this would be brevis, and that would be longus.
Cool.
Yeah, I got you. All right, so wait, what was the answer? So you went with C. Yes, that is correct. Extensor digiti minimi. So the more you look at these pictures and the more you understand like where everything is anatomically, you can like notice, if you notice like one muscle on there and you're like, that muscle's on the posterior side, then you already know where you are on the arm. So like I said, since I know that no muscles look like this on the flexor side, like you don't have flexors that wrap around like that, then you know that you're on the posterior side, right? So that's going to be like a little tip to help you remember that it's on the posterior side.
Hey, Justin.
Yeah.
For this last image, you zoomed in on this image, right? Because I think you showed this image earlier in the PowerPoint, but it made it easier to see, like when you asked this question. So I'm wondering if Dr. Muffley would probably like zoom in to make it easier for us to see.
He might zoom in, and if not, you can kind of like zoom in a little bit on Proctorio. Don't zoom in too much, because if you zoom in like super fast, it might like kick you out. But then obviously you can get back in. It's not like a big deal. But
Right.
yeah, if not, you can zoom in.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, I
I have
got
a
you.
question about the same
Yeah.
image. Before you change. Okay, so the arrow, like, I guess it's right on that muscle or tendon, but like right below it, like that beige looking thing, like right below it. What is that?
What is this right here?
Yeah.
That's most likely going to be your probably going to be your ulnar. So some part of your ulnar. I mean, he's not going to identify you to identify that. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Oh no, I was wondering, like, if I didn't know if it was part of like anything. That's why I was asking.
Oh no,
I mean,
no.
like aside from your bone, but I was wondering if it was like a muscle or I don't know, something. So I was making
No,
sure.
yeah. I think it's just a bone. Yeah, it's probably bone.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, good question. Okay, so that was going to be the extensor digitoid minimi. Yep, good job. Supinator.
I have a question about
Yes.
the, like, I don't know if you said it or not before, but for like the exam for any of the cadaver pics, is it just going to be like identify it, or is there like
I mean,
how
he can second word question it as well. Like, I mean, he can be like, what is this muscle and what's its innervation, right? Or he could say, what is the innervation of this, right? And you have to know, okay, this is the posterior side of the arm, extensor digitoid minimi, and it's going to be radial nerve, right? Does that help?
Yeah, are you going to have like examples of that in your quizzes?
Yeah, so I'll start next week trying to get those into those quizzes, like second and third hand questions based on cadavers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay. So like we said, is just going to be doing the opposite of the pronator teres, right? While the pronator teres is pronating, your supinator is just supinating, right? So it'll just be on the opposite side. Yeah, it's just important to note that it goes to your radius, right? It's obviously going to attach to your radius, because remember, your radius is the one that moves. Your ulnar never moves, right? So if you want to supinate your hand, a part of that muscle has to attach to the radius, right? Because that's the only bone that moves. So attach to the radius and allows for supination, right? Oh, it's also important to note that the biceps brachii and the brachioradialis are also supinated. So if you remember from like the last lecture, I think we talked about last two lectures, the biceps brachii attaches to the radial tuberosity of the radius, right? So the radius. So your biceps brachii attaches to your radius. If we remember, our radius moves, right? So since our radius moves, think about it. If you pronate your hand, right, that means your radius is going over your ulna. You follow, right? So your radius is going over your ulna. And if you try to do, for example, like forearm curls like this, like pronated curls, you could feel that your biceps are like almost not engaged, right? So the reason is because your biceps attach to your radius. So since they attach to your radius and your radius is pronated, your biceps is at like a mechanical disadvantage. Like it can't pull the way it wants, right? So it's because it's attached to your radius. So when you supine your hand, or when you begin to flex your arm, your biceps brachii is going to pull your radius back into place, right? It wants to pull it back into place because your biceps is naturally want to flex in a supine position, right? So when your radius is over, that's why your biceps brachii is kind of like a supinator as well, right? Because it's attached to the radius, it pulls the radius back into place in order to make it easier to flex your arm as well as supinate your arm, which is why they say the biceps brachii is also a supinator. Of course, its main function is flexion, right? Because the flexion of your biceps brachii. But if you pronate your arm, your biceps are going to want to supine your hand to bring it back to its mechanical advantage, right? And then your brachioradialis is also going to be a supinator because it comes from the posterior side of your arm, so lateral, and it's going to kind of wrap around your arm and attach to the lateral side of your radius. And when you think about it, if you pronate your hand, right, that means your brachioradialis is going to be pulled too far, right, like farther than it would like. So when it contracts, it's basically going to twist your arm back into place. So I have a video on that, so I'll help you remember like how to understand the brachioradialis. But remember, all these muscles can cause supination. Supinator, biceps brachii, and brachioradialis. Okay, so here's your supinator, right? This would be your supinator. Yeah, so it's pretty easy to identify. It's in the posterior side, and it's going to cause supination, or it's going to want to supinate your radius back into place. And here's what I was talking about, right? So this is your biceps brachii. this is what happens if you pronate your hand, right? If you pronate your hand, look at your biceps brachii. Does it look like it can contract with any type of force? No, right? Because it's like in a complete mechanical disadvantage because your radius is over your ulna. So that's why when you flex like this, it's like your biceps are not engaged at all because they look like this, right? So you can imagine your biceps looking like this. So when your biceps pull, it's not only going to want to allow for flexion, it's going to bring your radius back into place. So you can see it's going to pull your radius back into place so that you can flex your arm with the highest mechanical advantage. That makes sense, right? This is your biceps brachii. So again, biceps brachii, brachioradialis, as well as supinator are all going to help and assist with supination, right? In order to assist with supination and pronation, you have to attach to the radius, right? There's no way you can only attach to the ulnar and affect pronation and supination, right? Because the ulnar never moves. So if your attachment's only at the ulnar, you'll never be able to move, like you'll never be able to pronate or supinate with that muscle, right?
Hey, Justin.
Yes.
So how does the radius like turn like in place like that? Because I know that interosseous muscle attaches them, but how does it like? Does it just like twist to the side kind of, or?
Yeah. So in the like when we'll talk about in the hand lecture, what's actually cool is that your humerus attaches to your ulna, right? So your humerus attaches to your ulna. So your ulna is never gonna move, right? So your ulna is attached to your humerus. Your radius is like kind of attached to your humerus, but only by like ligaments, right? So your angular ligament, which we'll talk about in the next lecture, attaches to your radius. So it allows for movement of the radius. So the radius is going to allow, it's going to be able to move over your ulna. Even though you have an interosseous membrane in between, it's not like it's going to like rip, like, you know what I mean? It's not that tight. So it allows for movement of your radius. What's also important to note is that your humerus attaches to your ulna. Your humerus attaches to your ulna, but your hand attaches to your radius, right? Mostly to your radius, which makes sense, right? So if you pronate your hand, if your hand was attached to your ulna, you wouldn't be able to move your hand over, right? Because your ulna doesn't move, right? Does that make sense? So most of your hand is attached to your radius, and most of your humerus is attached to your ulna. So does that make a little bit more sense?
Yes, thank you.
Of course, gotcha. Okay, so here's a video on the brachioradialis and anconeus, and then we'll be basically almost done with, that would be all the forearm muscles, all 20 of them. So let me just play this video. This one's pretty short, so. Okay. I'm actually going to talk about the two muscles that we weren't able to talk about in the previous segments, and those two muscles are going to be the anconeus as well as the brachioradialis. So for the anconeus, it's actually going to be an extensor muscle, so it's going to be located in the posterior compartment of your arm, posterior side. Specifically, the proximal attachment of the anconeus is going to be on your lateral epicondyle, right, of your humerus, the lateral epicondyle of your humerus, and then it's going to be attaching to your olecranon as well as a proximal body of the ulna, so basically the ulna, and basically it's going to be attaching here to here. It's a small triangle muscle, and your anconeus is actually going to promote extension of your elbow, so extension of your arm, right? So that's going to be your anconeus, right? So the last muscle we didn't talk too much about is actually going to be your brachioradialis. So your brachioradialis is actually going to be, proximally, it's going to be attaching to the lateral side of your humerus. So lateral side of your humerus, and it's going to be wrapping around basically your arm and attaching to the lateral aspect, but distal portion of your radius. Right, so that's going to be your brachioradialis. It's kind of going to like wrap around basically. So it's going to wrap from the posterior side towards the anterior side. That would be your brachioradialis. So what does it do? Your brachioradialis. So for example, if you're in your pronated position, right? So your brachioradialis is coming from your lateral side of your humerus all the way to the distal radius right over here. So if your hand is pronated, your brachioradialis is actually going to help with flexion. Right, so it's going to pull back and help with flexion of your elbow, right? That's going to be the main function of your brachioradialis. The minor function of the brachioradialis, since it is attached towards like the lateral aspect, but the distal portion of the radius, and it's going to be like wrapping around from the posterior end, you can think if you pull this brachioradialis, it's actually going to cause some supination as well. So its main function is flexion, but it can also help with supination. Right, so that'll be your brachioradialis. Okay, So I hope that video made it a little bit more clear about like what the brachioradialis does and the anconeus. The anconeus, since it's only attached to the ulna, you can think your ulna doesn't move. So the only possible thing that your anconeus can do is just extension, right? Only extension of your elbow, right? And your brachioradialis, like we talked about in this video, is going to help with supination as well as flexion. Remember, both are innervated by the radial nerve, so that's important to know as well. So here's another comprehension check question. Which muscle is this one right here located? Extensor carpi ulnaris, flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, or extensor carpi radialis longus? Give you a few more seconds. All right. So yes, it's going to be extensor carpi ulnaris, right? So you all did really well. I saw all the A's in the chat. That's really good. This would be the extensor carpi ulnaris, right? And this over here would be the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis. Remember, think longus, alpha lateral. So it's more lateral than the brevis. Yes. Okay, so we're almost done with this lecture. So this one, I mean, he didn't talk too much about this, so I'm just going to skip this. Okay. After it does all its stuff. So for this one, I think the most important thing to note is that the capitulum of the humerus is going to attach to the radius or be like part of the radius, while the trochlear of the humerus is going to attach to the ulna, right? So I would note that. I would definitely note that the capitulum of the humerus is going to be towards the radial side, radius, and the trochlear of the humerus is towards the ulnar side. I would note that. And then on a minor note, the ulna has the coronoid process, remember, which the pronator teres attaches to, and the olecranon process, which is right here. This is the olecranon process, your elbow, basically. And then the radius has like the radial tuberosity, which makes sense. The biceps brachii attaches to that. Okay. And then here, he talked about this. I would think the most important thing to remember is the angular ligament, because most ligaments have joint capsules and collateral ligaments. So I mean, yeah, it's nice to know that we have a radial and an ulnar collateral ligament, so that's good. But I think the most important one is the angular ligament of the radius, because that's going to be the ligament that surrounds the radius, right? And it keeps it kind of like close to the humerus, right? That's going to be the angular ligament of the radius. So I would definitely note that one, angular ligament of the radius. So yeah, number 4 keeps the radius in place. That's what I have right here. Here, nothing too important, honestly. I guess just knowing that humeral ulnar is just between, I guess, like, yeah, the ulnar and the humerus, and then humeral radial is just radius and humerus. And there's nothing, I think, too important on this slide. Yeah, we talked about the angular ligament already. Okay, and then for this one, that's weird. Hold on. Okay. For this one, just note that, like, I guess that bursa are usually in highly mobile joints. Like we talked about some of the bursa in the shoulder. You also have some in the elbow as well, which just help with like making sure that your muscle is not just scraping across your bone, right? So I guess that's just note that. That's about it for this one. And then, I mean, this is cool when he talked about this, but he's not going to test you on like images like this. He told you he won't test you on like x-rays and stuff. So this is cool, but he's not going to test on it. And then, yeah, that's it. So that's it for that lecture. I'll give you guys like a 5-minute break, and then we'll get back to it.
On a couple slides back on the supinator slide, there's a another muscle that I just wanted to ask about.
Okay, give me 1 second. Hold on. My bad. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. So you said there was what
on the supinator slide.
Which is
It's
this
back
one?
probably like, well, I'm still looking at that like last slide.
Is it this one?
Yeah, back like 2 more.
This one?
Forward one.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's one that's like proximal and kind of like across the supinator. What is that?
Hold on, let me get my laser pointer. This one right here?
Yes.
That's the Anconius.
Got it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Gotcha.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask before you like switch the slideshow.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah. So since it's only attached to your ulna, you can see it only helps with extension of your elbow. That's the Anconius.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. So we'll start again at
I
like
also had a quick question.
10:44. Yeah.
Are all of the muscles in the posterior compartment innervated by the radial nerve, or are there any exceptions, like in the anterior compartment?
Let me think. I think it's all of them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, all of them. Okay. This lecture shouldn't take too long, honestly, because it's the hand. Honestly, I don't think it's going to take that long. It's only like 20 slides or 30 slides, so it won't be as long as the forum lecture. I made the forum lecture a little bit more dense because I wanted to break it up into you guys rather than just throwing 20 muscles at once. So, yeah, that's why this lecture was just a little bit longer.
What time does the quiz open?
Yeah, so
like
the quiz opens at 11:15, but I mean, you have until 2 or like 1:45 to take it, so you have all that time to take it.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, am I crazy? I thought I saw somewhere that the Q&A sessions are going to ground, or was that like a dream I had or something?
Oh no, that's reality. No, yeah. We're actually, yeah, I'm gonna go to campus today at 2. So I think it's gonna be group A, I think that's gonna be there. So yeah, so it is going to be on ground. So at 2 p.m., we're gonna have a review at USF in the auditorium. All 4 of our TAs will be there. We'll be there at 2 p.m. today. So yeah, feel free for group A to come, and then we'll just go over all the exam questions.
That's in our classroom?
Yeah, in the classroom.
Awesome. I'll see you there.
Yes, I'll see you there too. Yeah, I'll give it like 1 more minute. Let me just share my slide.
Hey, Justin, just a curiosity question. How long do we get to take the test? Is it like the full period or?
Yeah, you get the full period to take the test. How long did he say it was? It was like an hour and 10. 70 minutes, right? So like an hour and 10. Yeah, so you get all the time to take that exam. It's
Okay, I
plenty
wasn't
of
sure
time.
if they were going to cut it like short because it was 50 questions per 50 minutes or something.
No,
But okay,
no.
cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I got you. Wait, what was your question, Ryan? When will the TA for anatomy be for the week? Oh, when will the last TA session is what you're saying? Right now I said September 28th or September 18th. Yeah, my bad. September 18th, but I think I'm going to add another one after. It just depends on like how dense the ending material is, because I think he's going to talk about another lecture on Tuesday that's going to be on the exam on Thursday. So I might have to like squeeze another one in between. If not, like I'll try and fit it on that Friday, but like I'll keep you all posted. Don't worry. Like I'll see how dense the material is and how reasonable it is to get through it in one lecture. And if not, we'll just make another one, or I'll schedule another one. Probably that Monday, because there's no lectures there's no TA sessions on Monday. So I'll probably schedule it that Monday, if anything. Oh yeah, there will be so we're gonna go in person, but we're still gonna have Microsoft Teams online because we know that there's students that are like solely online. So we'll be there in person for the people who are there in person, but we're also gonna have Microsoft Teams available for the people who are online to ask questions as well. Yeah, it will also be online. Yep. How do you handle? Okay, so how do you handle classes during exam week? So it really depends on the person. I mean, I know people who've like went to class throughout the entire exam week and still been fine. I personally would go to some of the classes during exam week. It just really depended like, cause like it's a lot of exams, and usually when they like the stuff that they go through during exam week is stuff that's going to be on the next exam. So it's okay to like kind of push it until after the exam block because it's not going to be stuff that's on this exam. So it really depends how prepared you feel. If you feel like super prepared, like, I mean, I say go ahead and go watch the lectures. But I mean, sometimes it doesn't hurt to go watch the lectures because it's like a little break, right? So it's like a break from studying all this material, just like taking notes passively and then just saving them so you don't have to watch the lecture like over again, right? So it really depends on the person because exam week does get a little overwhelming. Yeah. Okay.
Justin, would you
Yes.
say that this class is like I don't want to say like the hardest, but like the most information out of all the classes, because this is the only one that I'm like barely breathing in.
Yeah, no, this was the hardest class for me. Like last year, like anatomy like was hard, like real hard.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I feel like biochem and stuff like that, it's easy to memorize those things because they're just like pathways for the most part. But this class, it's just like, I mean, I just got done going over the shoulder last night.
Mhm.
And it seems like in our group me that everybody is still on the shoulder. And I just don't know how I'm going to get the rest of this done by exam.
Yeah, I know. The reason why anatomy is just so much harder is because, I mean, with biochemistry, a bunch of you guys have probably taken biochemistry and
Yeah.
genetics and all that. So anatomy, I mean, maybe you've taken anatomy before, but not like this. Like this is like super intense anatomy. So that's why it's really hard. And yeah, I think
Well, it
anatomy
makes me
like
feel
by
better
far-
that you said that this is the hardest of the classes.
Yeah,
That
like
it's not going to get that much worse than the other ones. Okay, cool. Thank
this
you.
is the hardest for this semester. Yeah.
Okay,
Next
perfect.
semester is a
Thank
different
you.
story. Yeah. Personally for me, I mean, everybody is different, but yeah. Okay. Let me just share my screen so I don't take too much of y'all's time, and then we'll just go through the hand lecture. We'll go through that roughly quickly. Okay, let me just find the chat again. And then okay, I have no idea what happened. My app just literally crashed. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Loud
you.
and clear.
Okay, perfect. My bad, my app just crashed. Okay, so let me just share the screen, and then we'll be ready to go. So lecture 6. All right. And then, all right. Can everybody see the screen now, right? Hold on.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay, let's start. Just pull up the chat. All right, so for the hand, I'm just gonna go over the things that he like emphasized the most because he didn't want to go too much into detail in the hand because I mean the hand is extremely complicated. Like I mean we have hand surgeons, like people that specialize in the hand, solely the hand. So the hand is really complicated, but we're gonna go over like the things that he thinks that are super important, right? So on this slide, I feel like it's important to note that the radial nerve on the hand is only going to be sensory, right? So it's only going to be sensory, which means it's only going to be like the skin, like superficial stuff, right? So things that touch the back of your hand is going to be radial nerve sensory, right? While ulnar and median have motor and sensory, right? Okay, so for the carpal bones, you have to know all the carpal bones. Like that's a fact. Like I 100% think he's going to test on it. So he kind of breezed through it, but you definitely need to know all these carpal bones and know exactly where they are, which is why on the next slide, I gave you a mnemonic to help you remember. We use this in gross because it helps. It's some lovers try positions that they can't handle. So if you literally put it in this, it's like oriented in the way that you have to remember it, right? So if you hold your hand out like this, right? So the thumb would be on the right-hand side, so your thumb side, right? And then you would just go across, right? So it'd be some lovers try positions, and then you come back to the top, that they can't handle, right? So this would be the sum scaphoid, right? That would be the sum, also called navicular. Then you have your lunate, which would be the levers. Then you have triquetral, which is, I mean, you can call it triquetral. It's like the same thing. Because he calls it triquetral in like, sorry, that's the way I pronounce it. That's the only way I can remember it. It's hard to pronounce that. So he would call it triquetral, which is the same thing as triquetral, but that would be that. And then you have pisiform, which would be the positions, right? So pisiform for positions. And then if you go right across the top, it would be that they can't handle, right? So that they can't handle. So trapezium, trapezoid, capitate, and handmate. So I would definitely like use this. I mean, a mnemonic, I feel like it's pretty easy to remember, and it helps you remember where they are exactly, which one is lateral, which one is medial, which ones are closest to the radius, for example, like the lunate and the scaphoid, while the triquetral is like associated with the ulna, and these are more associated with the metacarpals, right? So I inputted this image because I feel like it's super clear to see the carpal bones, like these rocks basically. And then this mnemonic, I feel like is definitely going to help you all remember that. All right. So let me see. So here's going to be the innervations of the hand, right? So you have median nerve. So the best way to remember that is going to be median 1/2 loaf, right? Well, so median 1/2 loaf. So what that means is that the median nerve is going to innervate 1 and 2. So lumbricals 1 and 2. That's what the 1/2 stands for. So lumbricals 1 and 2, as well as loaf, as well as oaf. I mean, so it's going to be opponens pollicis, right? So opponens pollicis, which would be on your thumb side. That would be the deepest one. Then you have your abductor pollicis brevis, which allows for abduction of your thumb. And then you have your flexor pollicis brevis, right? So these all are going to be innervated by median nerve. So if you remember 1/2 loaf or median 1/2 loaf, then you know everything else is going to be ulnar, right? So this is going to be, this oaf right here is your thenar eminence, right? Thenar eminence means your thumb side, right? Hypothenar eminence is your pinky side, right? So thenar eminence is your thumb side. Hypothenar eminence is your pinky side. So your thenar eminence, which would be opponens pollis, abductor pollicis brevis, and flexor pollicis brevis, will all be innervated by median nerve, right? So pollicis, remember thumb, right? So these are all on the thumb. Pollicis, pollicis, pollicis. And the rest are going to be ulnar.
Say those eminences one more time.
Yeah, so thenar eminence, which is right here, this like pad right here, that's your thumb side, thenar eminence. So thenar, think thumb, right? So T for T. Thenar, thumb side. Hypothenar is going to be on your pinky side, right? So this thing right here. That would be your hypothenar.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Okay. And then again, remember there's no posterior muscles, no posterior compartment muscles of the hand. So which of these are not innervated by the median nerve, right? So you have your opponens digiti minimi, abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and second lumbrical. And the practice quiz is open at 11:15. Yeah. Okay, so is it going to be A, B, C, or D? Okay, give you one more second. All right. So it's going to be A, right? Because remember, yeah, you still have to remember median 1/2 loaf. Remember, it's median 1/2 loaf is on the thumb side. So the oaf is going to be the thumb one. So the opponens pollicis, right? So opponens pollicis, abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, right? The hypothenar eminence is also going to have an oaf, but it's called opponens digiti minimi, abductor digiti minimi, and then flexor digiti minimi, right? So they're just think digiti minimi pinky, right? It's literally saying opponent's pinky, right? So you're like, okay, then that's not going to be innervated by median nerve because that's on the pinky side, right? Because we remember median 1/2 loaf is on our thumb side, not our pinky side. So opponent's pinky or opponent's digiti minimi, abductor pollicis brevis, flexor pollicis brevis, and second lumbrical are all three of these are going to be innervated by median nerve. So yes, 1/2 loaf. Median 1/2 loaf. Okay. So again, he puts this image again. I mean, he put it so many times, it's just so obvious. So like, I feel like it's super important to note that like this is going to be testable material. This is the same thing that he put in the last lecture, but it's only talking about the hand, right? Because he put like the whole shoulder and like the arm, but this one he's talking about the hand, right? And he kind of went over it a little bit. So, and he was like, oh, like the ulnar nerve, is on the pinky, the thumb has the posterior radial. So that's just him like hinting at like, this is kind of important. So I would definitely note these to the T again.
And what point is the cutoff there for the median nerve?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, what is that? What would they call that when it's the median nerve versus the radial there?
Yeah, so he'll say someone has a cutaneous, severed their cutaneous innervation on their distal phalanx of their third metacarpal or their third phalange. So distal phalanx. This would be the distal phalanx. Yep.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Justin, I also noticed when he was in lecture, he was just like calling these like broadly, like radial and ulnar nerve. Do we have to know like the lateral cutaneous nerve, superficial branch, or is he going to be more broad?
Yeah, so he's just going to be broad in regards to ulnar, median, and radial. Over here, obviously, this would be lateral cutaneous, and this would be medial cutaneous. But regarding the hand, no, I would think all you need to know is radial, ulnar, and median.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, I got you.
Hey, Justin, how did you study the dermatomes? Like, what did you do?
So I literally would go on my hand, like I would look at my hand and tell me, okay, this is median nerve, this is ulnar, like this, like I would memorize the slide basically, but to my own arm and hand, so I can point it out, so that when you're on the exam, I mean, you can use your own arm, right? So you can use your arm to think, okay, I remember this was my median, right? So that helped me remember the dermatomes specifically by using it on my own body.
Awesome, thanks.
Yep, gotcha.
Kind of a little bit off topic, but I kind of on topic. So what is the difference? Sorry, it's kind of going back. What's the difference between the dermatome thing and the peripheral nerve innervation?
Yeah. So the dermatomes are just going to be coming from one spinal level, right? So for example, you have your shoulder, some region in your shoulder is innervated by C7. So for example, if you have numbness on this part of your shoulder right here, it might be a spinal nerve injury at C7 because dermatomes only have one single spinal nerve, right? While peripheral nerves, for example, is your brachial plexus, right? Your radial nerve comes from C6, C7, and C8, right? So it comes from multiple spinal levels. Those would be your peripheral nerves, and that would be the difference between peripheral nerves as well as dermatomes. Does that help?
Yeah, one is just more sensory, right? The other one's more motor.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. The most important thing I would say to note on this slide that he talked about would be knowing that the superficial palmar arch, he said in class, gets the majority is from the ulnar artery. So I would definitely note that the superficial palmar arch, which is right here, superficial palmar arch, is mostly ulnar artery, right? So the deep palmar arch is majority going to be radial artery. So that's going to be the arch that's under that. It's hard to see, but it would be that one. So I think that's the most important thing I would know on this slide. I mean, you could know you have a superior branch and a deep branch, but I think it's the most important thing to know is that the superficial palmar arch has majority ulnar artery, while the deep palmar arch has majority radial artery. Right. Okay, and then on this slide, he talked about a couple of branches, so I just noted them right here in this little green box. I mean, it would be easy for us to remember if we just think about them. So for example, radial artery, right? Radial artery is going to branch off into dorsal metacarpal arch, which makes sense, right? It's going to be an arch before the metacarpals, and then it's going to branch off into the metacarpals, right? So it's going to extend to your metacarpals right here, your metacarpals, and then your metacarpals are going to extend to your dorsal digital arteries, right? Which is go to your digits. So if you just think about it, I feel like the branches are going to make a little bit more sense, right? And it's also important to note that the radial pulse is going to be in the anatomical snuff box, right? Our anatomical snuff box is our brevis sandwich, right? Which we talked about in the last lecture. That's going to be your anatomical snuff box, and you can impulse or you can feel the radial nerve from there if you put your two fingers and palpate it, basically. So the most important thing on this slide is just to know that the median nerve runs through the transverse carpal ligament. I think that's about it. I mean, you just need to know you have a flexor retinaculum on the front side and extensor retinaculum on the posterior side, right? But the median nerve runs through the flexor retinaculum on the anterior side, right? That's it. On this one, nothing too much other than the fact that, remember that we talked about ulnar artery branches off into common interosseous artery, right? So the common interosseous comes off the ulnar artery, not the radial. So ulnar artery, common interosseous, and then anterior and posterior interosseous arteries. And this is just your transverse carpal ligament. Okay, that's it for this slide.
Question
Yeah.
about that part. The quadratus thing, is that above like all of that? That's covering.
Yeah.
those?
So your pronator quadratus would be right here. So you can see it right here. This is your pronator quadratus.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Here, I mean, nothing too important other than knowing that bursa around the flexor tendons in the transverse carpal ligament can impact the median nerve, right? Because if it swells, it can like compress the median nerve and ultimately lead to carpal tunnel syndrome, right? Eventually, that's literally it. Okay, and in here, he specifically said that he's not going to ask what is in each compartment, right? So he's not going to ask him what is. Yeah.
Quick question. He was pointing at some bones in the last slide, and I was trying to orient myself to that. Like,
So, what happened?
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So these are going to be these are probably going to be the carpal bones because I feel like there's multiple of them. Yeah. So these are going to be the sum, levers, tri positions, most likely. Yeah. So this is going to be like your scaphoid, your lunae, et cetera, like down the line. So yeah, these are most likely going to be your carpal bones.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So is that pisiform most medial?
Yeah. So the pisiform will most likely be, the pisiform kind of extends upward. So yeah, the sum, levers, tri positions. Yeah, it's going to be the most medial one. The most medial one that is like proximal, right? Because you have another one that's on top of that, but it's distal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it threw me too, just because that bone looks massive in that picture, and I don't remember the pisiform being that big.
Yeah, like, let me show you really quickly. I know, it's a little confusing there. Let me put it right here. Right here. So the pisiform is actually on top of the trichotillum, right? So that's why you see that little bump.
Oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying? So it's actually on top of this trichotillum. So yeah, it's like most medial, but it's most proximal medial, right? Like closer to you. The handmate would be the most distal medial. Does that make sense when I say that?
Yeah, I think it's just like a 2D image from the 90s is why. All right, cool, thanks.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. We'll do these. Okay. And then, yeah, he said he's not going to ask about what is in each compartment, so don't bother like memorizing what's in each compartment. And then just know that the radius is broad at the wrist and the ulna is fairly narrow, right? So this would be the radius, this broad one, and the ulna would be fairly narrow. It's the opposite when you get to the elbow, right? The elbow, the ulna is fairly broad while the radius is fairly narrow. So they kind of switch sides when they go, or switch like the side, yeah, how big they are as you go down your arm. That's going to be radius and ulna. Here, I mean, it was pretty cool. He talked about this, the carpal tunnel syndrome. I mean, the most important thing to know is that the median nerve goes through the carpal tunnel or the transverse carpal ligament, also known as flexor retinaculum, right? That's the most important thing to know on this slide. I mean, it was cool that like he talked about it, super cool fact, but he's definitely not going to test about that, other than knowing that this is the median nerve. And then over here, he's not going to test too much about the joints. I mean, he specifically said the only thing you need to know is that you have collaterals and joint capsules in the metacarpal phalangeal and interphalangeal joints. I think that's the most important thing to note, that you have a joint capsule and you have collateral ligaments. Other than that, like I think that you're good. Okay, and then for the hand, you have, remember, thenar eminence, think thumb, hypothenar eminence, think pinky, right? So the thenar eminence has your oaf, right, which is going to be opponens pollicis, abductor pollicis brevis, which allows for abduction, flexor pollicis brevis, which allows for flexion, right? So this is your opponent's pollicis, allowing you to like oppose your fingers, right? So this is opposition, right? Doing that. That's your opponent's pollicis. Your abductor pollicis brevis is going to allow you to do that C, right? So that's going to be abductor pollicis brevis. And then you have flexor pollicis brevis, which allows you to flex your thumb. Yep. And then there are no muscles on the posterior side of your hand. Yep. Oh, and then remember, you have oaf on both sides, right? You have an oaf on the thenar eminence and an oaf on the hypothenar eminence. But the oaf in hypothenar eminence it's going to be opponens digiti minimi, right? Abductor digiti minimi, right? Flexor digiti minimi, etc. So with this one, with these images, so I labeled each one with the letters like to help you remember like where they are. So for example, this is your adductor pollice, right? So if you think about it, like this muscle is going to pull your thumb inwards, right? It's pretty large and it's going to allow you to bring your thumb back, right? Bring your thumb back. So it's going to be called the adductor pollice. But it's important to note that the adductor pollice is not part of the thenar eminence, right? It is not part of the thenar eminence. The thenar eminence is oaf, right? But the A stands for abductor pollice brevis, right? So for example, this is your opponent's pollices. So it's pretty easy to identify the opponent's pollice because it's the deepest one, right? So when I think of the opponents, I think of them being super deep, like attached to the bone, right? So this would be your opponent's pollice right here. This is your opponent's pollice. Then you have your abductor pollice brevis right here. So you think if it pulls your thumb, it's going to abduct it, right? So you can think of the muscle just pulling and abducting your thumb away from the plane of field. And your flexor pollice brevis, which would be located right here, allows for flexion. So I put the F right here because he talked about this in the slide. He said that this blue one right here is actually attaching to this red part right here. And that's the flexor, right? And that makes sense because it's going to allow you to flex the thumb this way. The abductor instead is attached from this blue to these two reds, which is why I put the A there. And you can see if it pulls, it's going to adduct your thumb, not flex, abduct, excuse me, AB duct, right? And then you have AB duct over here as well, right? So which muscle, here's a comprehension check question. So which muscle is being pointed at in the image? This one right here. And I also inputted this as well, just in case it helped you.
Hey, Justin.
Yeah.
After we finish this question, could you run back through that last slide again? It was a little bit fast for me.
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, I know. I speak a little fast sometimes, so tell me if you want me to slow down. I'll go back and I'll go through it again. I got you.
Honestly, it's just been a long session, so I think I'm just getting a little tired.
No, I know. Same. I know. It's a lot of information. I know. I try to not make them too long, but it's, I mean, anatomy is a lot of information, y'all.
No, for sure, man. We actually really appreciate what you're doing, man. Thanks.
No, for real. Thanks. Means a lot. Okay, so yeah, so which muscle is being pointed at the image? And it's going to be, yes, B, abductor pollice brevis. Right here, so if you think about this muscle, if you look at it, you're like, okay, if I pull this muscle, what's going to happen? It's going to abduct my thumb, right? Over here, if you pull this muscle, it's going to flex your thumb. If you use this one, this is going to be opposition, right? So like this, opposition. And then for the last slide, just to go over it again really quickly, I'll take my time, but this is going to be the adductor pollice, right? So it's going to bring your thumb back, right? You can see that muscle, if it pulls, it brings your thumb back into place, okay? This is why he showed it right here. So it's attaching right here, as well as this red portion right here. So you can see it's going to just basically be pulling your thumb back, right? On this side, these are your thenar eminence muscles, your oaf. This would be your opponent's pollicis right here, this deep one. So when I think opponents, I think it's super deep. It's like almost attached to the bone, or it is attached to the bone. This would be your opponent's pollice, right? Also located right here. Then you have your abductor pollice brevis, right, which is right here, abductor. Remember, abduction is going to be part of your thenar muscles. So if you pull it, it's going to allow, excuse me, my bad, abduction like that. That's your abductor pollice brevis. And then the last one, you have your flexor pollice brevis located right here, which is attached from this blue mark to this red mark, and it's going to allow for flexion of your, flexion of your thumb like that. So did that help?
Yeah, so I guess my question is, so you say we have 3 thenar muscles, and you point to these OAF, but then you have below that the abductor the adductor pollicis.
Yeah.
The adductor. Okay.
AD. My bad. I'll make that a capital D, but yeah, adductor is not part of it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Let's get. Okay. So we have question.
So when you're looking at the hand, this is
I can't hear you.
Is that the palmar aspect of the hand that we're looking at in the pictures?
Oh, like this? Yeah, this is the palmar aspect.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay, and then hypothenar eminence. remember, hypothenar is on the pinky side, right? So it's going to be on the pinky side. And you're going to have OAF as well, right? But remember, it's just switching up policies for digitime minimi. That's just simply what it's doing. It's the same thing, same OAF, but you have digitime minimi instead. So it's opponents digitime minimi, abductor digitime minimi, and flexor digitime minimi, right? So this would be the opponents right here. A good note that if he does put these images right here on the exam, a good note is that the opponents do not reach the phalanges, right? So if you see that the origin and the insertion doesn't reach the phalanges, because this is the metacarpal, if it doesn't reach the phalanges, then you know they're talking about the opponents, right? Because all the other ones in the thenar and hypothenar eminence will reach the phalanges, like this one right here. This is part of the phalange. So I wrote a little note for that just to help you out. So yeah, this would be opponents. This would be abductor digiti minimi, and then you can't see too well here, but this would be the flexor digitime minimi. It's literally right deep to the abductor digiti minimi. Yes, and those would be those. So, so for the intrinsic muscles of the hand, we have 4 lumbricals, right? And they start from 2 through 5. So what their second, third, fourth, and fifth phalange all have lumbricals, right? And they attach to the radial side. When I say radial side, I mean closer to the thumb side, right? So if you hold your hand up like this, your lumbricals are attached to this side, this side, this side, and this side, because they're closer to the thumb side, right? It's closer to the thumb side. That's what I mean by radial side. And they also attach to the tendons of the flexor digitorum profundus, which is why I wrote that note right there. So I put a little thing here just to help you understand how the lumbricals like move or like what's their action. It's actually really complex, like how the lumbricals like do what they do, but I just put an image to help you remember. They extend the interphalangeal joint, right? So the joints between the phalanges, right? So these would be like joints between the phalanges, right? These, right? They extend that, right? So you can see right here, it's going to extend that. And it's going to flex the metacarpal phalangeal joint, but it's also going to cause radial deviation. The reason why it causes radial deviation, which means deviating your hand or your fingers to the radial side, right? So deviating it to your thumb side, right? Is because they're attached to the radial side of each of your fingers. The reason why they cause extension at the interphalangeal joint is it's actually really complex, but just know that they extend because they pull like this little band thing, and since they pull this band thing, this lateral band, it's gonna cause extension at the interphalangeal joint. You don't need to know the band, but it's just to help you, like, I guess if you wanted to know why it does that, this is a little picture as to how it does that. But just know that it extends the interphalangeal joint and that it causes radial deviation. So which muscle is being pointed at by the arrow? Is it A, B, C, or D? So we're almost done. Yeah, we're almost done. We probably have like less than like 10 slides left. So.
Hey, Justin, a real quick question. So the loaf is orienting the muscles between the hypothenar and thenar regions, and the loaf is the innervations of the median nerve?
Yeah, so 1/2 loaf is going to be median nerve. So lumbricals 1 and 2 are going to be median nerve, as well as the oaf on the thenar eminence side. Remember, the hypothenar eminence is ulnar nerve. So it's important to remember that. Hypothenar eminence, which is pinky side, is all ulnar nerve. Even though it's oaf, it's still ulnar nerve. That's where you have to remember that median 1/2 oaf, median 1/2 loaf is going to be on the thumb side, right? So does that help?
Yes, I was just trying to keep straight loaf versus oaf.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's a little complicated, but yeah, that's it. Okay. So give you a few more seconds. Okay. So yes, it's going to be the opponent's digiti minimi, right? So this is the opponent's digiti minimi. That's why I put this image right here, because it doesn't get to the phalanges. It only goes to the metacarpals. And then you have opponent's pollicis over here. Good. Okay, so this is going to be pads. So the best way to remember the actually, why did I put pads here? We're not even talking about pads. Okay, well, we'll talk about them soon. But so for the adductor pollicis, remember, this is not part of the thenar eminence, right? This is located right here, and it's going to allow for just adduction, right? So adductor pollicis is not going to be part of the thenar eminence. Adductor pollicis. That's important to note. We'll talk about pads later. Oh, wait. Oh, there are pads. Wow, great. Okay, so for pads, we'll talk about it, but those are going to be your adductors. The reason why you remember it as pads is their palmar interosseous muscle are going to cause adduction, right? So adduction which just means bringing your fingers back, right? So from here to here is adduction, right? And this is the same thing. I'm not going to go over it, but these are the same exact images that he showed us earlier. Remember, adductor pollice, not part of the thenar eminence. This, nothing to note, I think, here. I mean, it's cool that we have an extensor expansion heard, but I don't think we need to understand anything here. And then, oh, it's also important that we have 3 pads, right? So we have 3 pads and 4 dabs. So if you hold your hand out, right? So hold your hand out and like you're like looking at your hand or like you're looking at your nails, right? And if you try to adduct all your fingers, right? So just try to do that a few times, like adducting your fingers, right? So if you keep adducting, you'll notice that your middle finger doesn't move anywhere, right? So if you keep doing that, your middle finger is not going to go anywhere, meaning that your middle finger doesn't adduct, right? It does not adduct, right? It doesn't go away, right? It just stays in the same spot. So we already have an adductor pollice, so the thumb doesn't count, right? So the index finger adducting from the middle finger is 1 pad, right? The middle finger doesn't go anywhere, right? So that doesn't adduct, so there's no muscles there. You have no pads there. The index finger adducts from the middle finger, so you're going to have another pad there. So that's your second pad. And then your little finger, so your pinky is going to adduct as well, and that'll be your third pad. So your 3 pads are attached to your index finger, ring finger, and then pinky. So, and then the third digit is the midline. So I hope that like little demonstration helped you remember like pads, right? So here they are, your 3 pads. Remember, your third digit does not adduct because it stays in the same spot, right, when you do that. So for dabs, you actually have 4 dabs, right? So the reason why you have 4 dabs, so again, if you hold your hand out and you start abducting, right? So abducting your hands, right? So abduction, right? The reason why you have 4 dabs or abduction is because your index abducts away from your middle finger, right? So that's one abduction. Your middle finger, if it goes to the left, that's left abduction, right? If it goes to the right, that's right abduction. So you actually have 2 dabs on your middle finger. So you have 1, 2, 3, and then your ring finger will be your 4th one. Because your pinky, you already have an abductor digiti minimi, right? That's part of your thenar or hypothenar eminence, right? So you have 4 dabs, and 3 pads, right? So I hope that like little demonstration like helped you all remember that. Okay, so which muscle is this comprehension question? So flexor pollicis brevis, abductor pollicis brevis, opponens pollicis, or abductor pollicis, or adductor, yeah, AD. Okay. So yes, it is going to be C, your opponens pollicis right here. This would be your opponens pollicis. This would be your flexor pollicis brevis, this one. And you can't see, but on this side would be your abductor. Oh, wait, excuse me. This is your abductor pollicis brevis, and the opposite side would be your flexor pollicis brevis. But yes, this is correct. This would be your opponens pollicis, which is why I put this little image right here just to help you out as well. Okay. These are your pads, which would be on the anterior side, right? So adduction, so palmar interosseous for adduction. And then you're going to have your dabs. So for dabs, remember, I'll show you so for dabs, if you hold your hand out like this, you're looking at your nails, right? So looking at your nails, abduction, so abduction means to take away, right? So pull away. So if you try to pull away your fingers, right, you would notice your index finger is able to do that, right? So that's 1 dab. Your middle finger, if you abduct to the left, that's 1. If you abduct to the right, that's another, right? So your middle finger has 2 dabs. So 1, 2, 3, and your index finger also allows for abduction, which is why you have 4. The pinky doesn't count because you already have an abductor digiti minimi, right? That's already in the hypothenar eminence. So does that help?
I have a question with the fingers.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the abduction of it, like, is that when you're opening them like away, and then when you adduct them, it's there. When you're putting your fingers together, like towards the middle finger.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And then, I mean, there was nothing on this. Yeah, there was nothing on this slide to talk about. And then just the important thing to note, anterior arm is going to be musculocutaneous. So that would be over here, anterior arm, anterior forearm, as well as 1/2 loaf, median, you know what I mean, median 1/2 loaf, which would be on the thenar side, which would be median nerve. And an ulnar nerve would be the rest of the intrinsic hand muscles, as well as the flexor carpi ulnaris and the ulnar head of the flexor digitorum profundus. And then posterior, remember, radial nerve is going to take the posterior arm, the forearm, and the hand. And that's it. We didn't go too much over 2 hours, so that's good. Are there any questions?
Justin, you're a beast, man. Just wanted to say thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I got you. I just try to make that as digestible as possible because there's a lot of forearm muscles. My bad for going a little bit over time, but I wanted to make sure you guys really got the muscles down packed.
Yeah, super helpful, bro.
Gotcha.
Next, can you make videos for the back? That would be helpful too if you did back videos.
Yeah, I've tried. I mean, I'll try to do like maybe some videos for the later ones. The reason why I did it for the forearm is because I mean, there's 20 muscles and they all sound the same if you don't like understand the differences, which is why I feel like you needed some demonstration for that. So I'm just gonna try and be as helpful as possible for y'all. So just let me know. But yeah, if you have any questions, like I'll be here for a little bit, but feel free to go because I know this is a long session. And then have fun taking your quiz. And anybody that's going on campus, I'll see you at 2 p.m. So, I mean, feel free to just like stop by, ask questions, say hi, whatever you want to do. I'll be there, and all the other TAs will be there as well.
Hey, Justin, what innervates the other half of the loaf, like the third and fourth lumbricals?
Ulnar nerve.
Okay. And then can you actually go back like to slide 20? It was 26. It was the one you said musculocutaneous says anterior arm. Median nerve does anterior forearm and the 1/2 lobe. And then I didn't get the ulnar nerve.
Yeah, so ulnar nerve is going to be right there. So flexor carpi ulnaris and ulnar head of flexor digitorum profundus, as well as the rest of the intrinsic hand muscles. That's not included like in the median 1/2 loaf, right?
Thank you.
Got you. Okay.
Hey,
Any
Justin.
other- yeah.
Could you review the interossi one more time?
So like the pads and dabs?
Yeah, the dabs more specifically for me.
Okay, yeah. So hold your hand out like in front of you, like you're looking at your nails. Again, so if you abduct, so AB, I'm just gonna say AB, right? So abduct all your fingers, right? They're gonna spread apart, right? So we can't count the pinky because you have an abductor digiti minimi already, because we're talking about dabs, right? That's a different muscle. Abductor digiti minimi is part of the hypothenar eminence. So now you only have 3 fingers, right? So you abduct those. Your index is going to be 1 dab, right? Because the index is abducting from the middle finger, right? So that'll be 1 dab. Your middle finger, if you pull your middle finger to the left like this, or to the right, whatever, that's 1 abduction. If it moves to the left, that'll be another abduction, right? So your middle finger actually has 2 dabs, 1 on each side, right? So you're gonna have the first dab, second and third, will be second and third, so second and third. And then your 4th dab will be your index finger abducting from your middle finger, or abducting.
All right, that makes more sense. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
And also, I may have missed the email, but the session for the review is live on ground.
Yeah, it's on ground. Yep, it'll be on ground from 2 p.m. until, I don't know, like 3 or 4. And then, yeah, so feel free if your group, I don't know what group it is. I think it's group A, so check the email. I think it's group A. They'll be there. And then, yep, feel free to ask questions, but we'll still have Microsoft Teams on there. So for people who are online, they can still watch the thing.
All right, cool. Thanks, man.
Got you.
This is a separate question about like the quiz. I know they say we have to go to the review sessions to review the to get like the answers for the quiz. So does that mean like not even at a later date the answers will never be available? Correct?
I think so. I'll double check with you on that, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Hey, actually, the answers are available after the session.
Okay.
So
after?
Yeah, after the
Okay,
session,
good.
they all tell you which ones were correct, even if you don't attend the Q&A.
Okay, then you can see the answers.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Justin,
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, like along the lines of studying, how do you suggest taking these next 2 weeks? Because I'm trying to study for the exam, but I'm also receiving information from other class. Like, how did you balance everything in this time? Because it's just a lot.
Yeah, I know, it gets really stressful. So right now, so since you're like 2 weeks out, I would still try to balance all your classes. Like, so making sure that like throughout the week, like for example, like when you go to lecture or when you watch lecture, you would go home and go through the lectures that you talked about that day, right? And on the weekends, what I would do is I would go over all the lectures of that week, right? So, but that's not going to be the first time I went over them because I went over them throughout the days as they went on, right? So it should be a little bit quicker to go through them throughout the weekend. But I wanted to emphasize that like you have to make sure that you're like going through all the lectures of like all your classes, because if you focus on just anatomy, you're going to forget everything for biochem and genetics. And what's super important is always what I did on the weekends is always like review. So I would like to go to like lecture 1 or like lecture 2 of some classes and be like, okay, what do I forget? What do I remember, etc. But once it starts getting to exam time, that's when like my priorities are just like, poof, like they come out the window, because like my priority is the next exam. So like, for example, like once it gets close to anatomy, I'm like, okay, anatomy all day. And then biochem's coming next. And I'm like, okay, like I'll study like immuno and like genetics a little bit, but biochem's on Monday. So I want to make sure like I can like hammer down biochem. But because I've reviewed all of like immuno and genetics way before, it's not like I'm only have one day to go through 9 lectures that I have no idea what's going on. Do you see what I'm saying? But of course it sounds easy and picture perfect. And I know there's going to be bumps in here and there, but that's like the general idea to how to balance the best with all these classes. And I know it gets a little stressful. I feel you.
Yeah, I for the most part, like I've kept up with like making Anki and reviewing like the PowerPoints, like reviewing the lectures like thoroughly, but it's just like I haven't had time to like go back and practice the material, you know what I mean? Because it's like when you go back to practice, there's new material, so it's crazy.
Yeah. No, it's I know it's intense. This is a really intense program. So what's good though is that Fridays there's no class, right? So what helps is that you have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to catch up on all the material that we just talked about throughout the week, right? So, I mean, I think the good part is that we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I mean, the bad part is that lectures just keep on coming, right? So we just gotta manage it the best we can, and just know that like when you start getting towards your exam, like for example, like biochemistry, for example, you're gonna like hammer biochemistry like that Sunday and that Saturday. So you're reviewing throughout these 2 weeks, and 3 weeks are going to pay off because you're only going to focus on like, for example, biochem the Sunday before or like the Saturday before, and then it'll be like a little bit easier when you get through these exams. I know it's stressful.
All right, got it, man. Thank you. No, it's just a learning curve. I'm getting used to it. You know what I mean?
I got you. Yeah, no, got you. And after the first exam block, you'll see what worked for you and what didn't, and you'll just make adjustments from there.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate
it. Yeah, for sure.
Hey, Justin, one last question. If you are, I guess if you do schedule an additional review session after the 18th, which is after next Friday, somewhere before the exam, where will you post that? On the MSP3 Canvas or an email to everybody, or how will that work?
Yeah, so I'll post it on an announcement, and then I'll probably say it on the 18th. Like on the September 18th one, I'll probably also say like, hey, I can't do all 3 lectures here, or hey, I can. Like, so if I can't, then I'll just say it during the meeting, and I'll also put an announcement to let you know when we'll have another one.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You do such great work. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, thank you.
Justin, hey, to piggyback on a previous question, in terms of studying specifically for anatomy, it's, one of the hardest, I would say that it would be my hardest course at this point. So I know that he emphasizes drawing, but what else did you do to become really like a master at this?
Yeah. So for anatomy, I would say what a really good thing to do is to make charts. So for example, like make charts for all your muscles. So because like obviously we talk like about a lot of muscles, right? So it'd be a really good idea to make a chart of all your muscles, and then for each column you have innervations, arterial supply, attachments, as well as actions, what they do. So if you made like a chart like that, I mean, you don't have to make a ginormous one. You can make one for the back, you can make one for the forearm, etc. If you make these little charts, it's going to help you like concise everything into once and be able to like categorize these things so that you know, oh, this is this and oh, this is that. So I think columns and charts are going to help you out a lot, as well as like using your own body. Like I would use my own body all the time. I'd be like, okay, it's over here, it's over here, it's over here, because nothing helps you remember things more than when you relate it to yourself, right? So I think that's going to be also a huge thing, is like just being able to talk to yourself and like touch like your arm and stuff like that, and being able, okay, this is extensor, whatever. So, right? So I think those are going to be things that are going to help you with your success.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I also have another question. On the exam itself, is he gonna do a mix of like the pictures of the cadaver pictures plus like the pictures that are in the on his PowerPoint? Is he gonna
so he'll only have, if he puts pictures, it's only going to be cadaver pictures. He's not going to put an animated picture and ask you to identify that, because it's not realistic, right? So he'll use he's only going to use like cadaver pictures to identify stuff, but he can also use those cadaver pictures to ask you what the action of that muscle is, what the innervation is, etc. So that's why it's important to know where these muscles are on cadaveric images. In regards to the rest of the exam, it's going to be, I mean, some of it will be recall, right? So some of it will be like, what's the innervation of the trapezius, you know, like spinal accessory nerve, cranial nerve 11. And some of it would be like scenarios, right? Some of it would be like clinical scenarios where you have to like really think about what's the action of the muscle and what he's talking about in order to get the right answer, right? So it's just a mix of a lot of those things.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Justin, you said, what would you make your columns on like the chart be again, if we make charts to remember things?
Yeah, so if you make charts, I would line all the muscles down, right, on one chart, on one column, and then coming down for the rest of the columns, you would put like innervations, so nerve supply, arterial supply, attachments, so proximal and distal, as well as the actions of them, right? So like what their actions are, like what they do. Right, so those will be able to help you remember like all the general things for those muscles, right? And then, yeah, I think the columns will definitely help, but also looking at the images on the slides, because you want to know how these muscles are related to each other, right? So not only is it super important to know all those facts, it's also important to know this is lateral to that, this is medial to that, etc. Right?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, gotcha.
Hi, Justin. Can you repeat that with the chart that you said? You said with the muscles and innervations, like the different columns that you made?
Yeah, so you make one column for muscles, and then the next columns, or the columns down, you'll have innervations, so which would be like innervations and nerve supply. Then you have arterial supplies, attachments, so proximal and distal, as well as the actions, right? So that's going to be the general things that you need to know for like every single muscle that we talk about, or most of them, right? So I would use that in order to understand what these muscles are. But on top of that, it's also important to know the relationships of each muscle. So once you have those down packed, then I feel like it's really important to know that this muscle is lateral to that, or this one's superficial and deep to that. And then I feel like you'll be in pretty good hands after that.
All right, thank you.
Yep. All right. Any more questions? Okay. All right. So if you guys don't have any questions, thank you so much. I'll see you at the 2 p.m. session. So if you're there, I'll see you in person. If not, I'll see you online. Thank you for your time, everybody, and I hope this helped. All right. Take it easy.